Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Hines, and I'm the host for an unexpected podcast. I just wanted to let everyone know that we will now be starting to put our episodes on Apple Podcasts. So if you would prefer to simply listen without saying anything, it's available to you. Please let us know in the comments section if listening to the Duel is a little bit of a struggle, or if you prefer the Duel be left out of the Apple Podcast version. Thank you for your support, and let's get into this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to an unexpected podcast. My name is Tim, and with me as always, we have Matt, Mick, and Devin, and this week's guest is Alistair King. On this week's episode, we're going to be going over a list by Arash Hussein, and we're going to be moving into the main topic of today, which is Erebor Reclaimed and Army of Thror. And we're going to be moving into a duel where it'll be a 700-point battle where Devin will be going up against Alistair King. So for this week's list, it's by Arash Hussein, and I'm going to move it over to Alistair to review. So Alistair, why don't you go ahead and look over this week's list?
So this week's list is a 700-point Mirkwood list, which I think is partly because everyone knows I'm the dwarf guy, so you thought you'd get me to read out an elf list as some sort of weird joke. But so leading it off as the general is Frangel with Circlet of Kings, the additional Elven Blade and heavy armor. So he gets to do his spell stuff and gets the +1 attack and fight 7 shenanigans while on foot. He leads 4 Palace Guard with Shield, 4 Palace Guard with Spear, 2 Armoured Elves with Shield, 2 Armoured Elves with Glaive, and an Armoured Elf with a Banner. And then Warband 2 is a Palace Guard Captain with Shield, 4 Armoured Elves with Shield, 5 Armoured Elves with Glaives. And then Warband 3 is Legolas with Elven Cloak, 5 Armoured Elves with Bow, and a Wood Elf Sentinel. So a very elf-heavy list to start off with. Genuinely, if I imagine a Frangel's Halls list, that's kind of what I'm expecting. Just on a brief glance, I like the Wood Elf Sentinel. I think having 1 or 2 in an army is really good. Legolas is really handy, and becoming more handy again with his deadly shot as you're starting to get more support heroes who hang around at the back, like your Aldor or your Bard's kids and stuff like that. Basically, if there's a child, use Legolas to shoot it. And then sort of Frangel's great, even on foot. I kind of often like to just put him on horse so you get a bit of extra mobility and then you can dismount him later to get the most out of his swords rule. Initial feeling, I'll have to work out how many models it is. It feels a bit on the small side model count wise.
31.
31 models, yeah.
31
is
models, yeah.
Probably the bottom end of what you want to be at 700 points, in my opinion. You got fairly good amount of D6, but you're going to be relying on your heroes to make sure you keep up the kill count ahead of your opponent, because you could crumble quite quickly. But anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, can I just add, if you see children, we are not recommending shooting children with Legolas. Or with anything at all. So don't do that.
So, I mean...
Only more gaming.
I think, just to touch on the horse bit with Thranduil, I think a very common argument is obviously Thranduil is a lot more powerful, or seemingly so, a lot more powerful on foot than on horse. So the idea is why take the horse at all? I think having the horse actually does give you a little bit of flexibility and as a delivery option. The only problem I have with bringing the horse in is the only model I think you could lose is the Wood Elf Sentinel. I mean, you're on the bottom end of what you really should have as far as 30 points. You'd have 30 models. You would have to lose another elf, bringing you to 30 if you took anything else but the Sentinel. And I say the Sentinel because he's 25 points, allowing you to bring another elf in, as a replacement. And I know that would kind of suck. I think also I agree with Alistair. Okay.
See, I would drop the Elven Cloak on Legolas to get the horse.
Is an Elven Cloak 10 points?
Yeah, it is in this list.
10 points on Legolas.
Oh my God! Yeah, definitely drop that. That's yeah, that Elven Cloak is not going to do you very much good in most of your matchups. I have to find he's really just behind a horde of models, which unfortunately no longer really blocks a line of sight for an Elven Cloak. So yeah, absolutely drop that and give Thranduil a horse. That's that'd be the first thing I would do. And as Alistair said, you could just dismount him later. I mean, you're going to have to kind of strategically plan that out because your opponent may want to keep him on horse, especially if they get the opportunity to surround him. So they may keep trying to, tag him and get him surrounded and try to kill him while he's on the horse using heroic strikes and such. So just really plan that out when you actually deliver him. How do you guys feel about him on elk? Just curious.
Well, I think
not that I would recommend it for this list, but I'm just for our viewers who might wonder about that.
No, so I really like the model of the elk, but because of its larger base, I think it's 50mm. I generally found it unplayable compared to the horse. Horse is generally vastly superior, I found.
So I've used Legolas. Oh, I'm sorry, Thranduil on elk a lot, but in a different sort of list. I mean, when you put Thranduil on the elk, he becomes the hero assassin because he becomes because he gets the strength 5. And if I'm allying him into another list, I often put him on elk because I often find like Bard on horse and Thranduil on elk in the same list becomes a very deadly combination because they go from place to place and just kill heroes together. I think that's a better use for Thranduil in that type of list than in this type of list because this is the Thranduil's Hall's Ball of Death list where he's clearly trying to maximize the number of figures that are going to be fighting around Thranduil so he can maximize the fight value bonus and he can maximize the +1 to wound, which is I think why he's got the Palace Guard Captain in here, which is actually a Palace Guard Captain fighting next to Thranduil is a really potent combination because the Palace Guard Captain becomes fight 7 with +1 to wound. And I think that's a pretty deadly combination standing next to Thranduil. But I don't think you want to put him on elk or even necessarily on horse in this list when what you're going to have is kind of the ball of +1 to wound around Thranduil. And the purpose of this list is basically not to have Thranduil move. The whole battle line or ball around him is going to move.
The horse does give him a bigger aura of effect base, though, which can be handy. Although I was thinking, actually, you may be better off putting Legolas on horse instead.
Yeah, that's what you do.
That would be the first priority for me as well.
Yeah, is you drop the Elven Cloak from Legolas, you put Legolas on horse, he becomes your mobile guy. I mean, I also think I would, although I understand the kind of the purpose of the Wood Elf Sentinel in this list, I never find that they're worth 25 points. And there's a lot of optimization that could be done in this list with 25 points. And I almost wonder if that's better.
What would you do with it with 25 points?
Well, I mean, for one thing is I'd give spears to all the palace guards so that they could stand behind everybody. And because the optimal configuration here is an armored elf with shield in front and palace guard with spear or spear and shield in the back. So ideally I'd want to have kind of all my palace guard with spear and shield. I'd drop the glaives from the armored elves.
Give them shields.
And give them shields, with the exception of the armored elf banner, whom I'd give a glaive so he could stand behind somebody, probably the palace guard captain.
Can he use a glaive and a banner?
Yes, you can use.
They can still okay.
I mean, the other thing you could do is put more bows into this list. This list is kind of bow light for Thranduil's Hall's list, and you could probably throw some more in at 2 points a pop. You could give him the glaive guys. Because I think they took that restriction out, so you can now have a glaive and a bow. It makes a very expensive figure, or you could just add some more guys in with bows to increase your numbers with that 25 points. The other thing to think about is a Mirkwood Cav or two in one of these war bands at 16 points.
I think Mirkwood Cav, if you took out the Mirkwood the Sentinel, you need to take out something else if you're going to do any Cav.
Well, no, you take out the Mirkwood Sentinel, and then you could put in one Mirkwood Cav, and then have a few points left over to kind of adjust how you're, add some spears, add some shields, add some bows, that type of stuff.
All right. So in that case, what about this? Like, at the moment, with Thranduil and Legolas, you have Valor and Legend, which allows you to take 33 models. He's currently sitting on 31. I'm thinking, what do you guys think about potentially actually dropping the Palace Guard Captain with a shield, which is 80? Because that would allow him to take several models mounted.
You lose the march.
You lose the march, but you get cavalry. You lose the 2 might points and 1 big killer, but then you can get extra bows, extra cavalry, extra horse, extra another horse.
You also lose fight 7. You lose a fight 7 hero with +1 to wound. So keep in mind, you are losing significant. A Palace Guard captain being tagged around Thranduil does have significant advantages. Plus, he only has 6 points of might once you do that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but you definitely want to consider what you're losing there. You are losing a very.
If I was to do that, I'd probably consider allying in Survivors of Lake Town. Get a cheap captain in for the march, bit of extra might, and then you can boost up your numbers quite nicely with some spearmen and that, just to go behind your elves or some guys to go in the front rank as your fodder. It's a pretty common thing that some of the players have done sort of in the UK, is bulk out your Mirkwood list with Lake Town guys, because at the moment you're stuck on 31 models, and especially at the 700 points, it's a bit sort of fragile, whereas you can easily get another 10 guys in if you, say, swap that Palace Guard captain for Lake Town's guys and about another 6 or 7 spearmen from there.
Now, are you guys happy with the 8 Palace Guard, or do you think there needs to be more or less? Or it's
I'm happy assuming they all have spears.
It just says with spear. No,
with yeah, some of them only have shields and not spears. I would personally give them all shield and spear. Like, I think he needs defense 6 Palace Guard. I think those are primarily the hard-hitting units he has in his army because of the +1 to wound mechanic. And I think he should give all the spear ones shield. Like, I can agree that, with Matt's assessment that, all right, so Wood Elf Sentinel, in good versus evil, I would keep it probably. And in just free-for-all, like blue on blue, I can see the arguments to take it away. If you take Mac's advice to take away the Mirkwood Sentinel, or Mick's advice to reduce the Palace Guard captain to nothing and then to divide them up amongst Warband, if you take either of those options, then at least give them all shields and spears. Keep them in the back ranks if you need to, but obviously you're probably going to charge with them if you need the bodyguard ability for some reason, even despite having an elven army. But that's personally my agreement with the Palace Guard. But I do think 8 is a solid number for around Thranduil.
Now, do you guys think that the Circlet of Kings is something that you can, like, it's going to be so necessary based on the low amount of numbers, or is it worth just kind of,
I think you need the terror bubble that it can give you because of the low numbers, and you can pretty much cover your whole army in it just to help balance up the fights a bit. So yeah, I would say it's essential with how the list is at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Any other criticisms or critiques on the list?
I guess the only other point I'd make is that there is an upward limit of Palace Guard that you want in this list, because the Palace Guard are really only worth their extra points if they're next to Thranduil, or within 3 or 6 inches of Thranduil, depending on the special rule. And there's no point in kind of having more than you can fit in that space. And they really also only need to be in the second rank. You can get the slightly cheaper armored elves to take up the front rank. So I'm not sure that there's much point to having more than 6 or 8 of these guys, although Devin's point is valid. You definitely want them all to have a spear. Preferably a shield to kind of protect your investment and get them up to defense 6, but definitely a spear.
Yeah, I wouldn't go more than 8 of the guys, and realistically, I'd probably just only go for 6 with the spears, but 8's got a bit of redundancy.
I guess, so the primary question is, do we all feel it's better to drop the Palace Guard, as Mick mentioned, and I'm going to avoid the ally thing. Yeah, the Palace Guard captain, sorry. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to avoid the whole ally thing that Alistair mentioned. I agree, allying in Lake Town is a solid idea, 100%. And the difficulty with reviewing these lists is it seems like you intended to make a Mirkwood list. So if that's not your intention, if you just want to make a competitive list, then allying in Lake Town, awesome idea, 100% agree with that. And I think everyone on the podcast could agree. We've seen that variation a lot. But within just sticking with a Mirkwood list, for those in the podcast, I guess the final thought here is, should we just remove the Sentinel, a very clean thing there, and just revise it as Matt had stated, or remove the Palace Guard captain. I personally am in vote for just removing the Sentinel and just, adding shields and spears to your Palace Guard, adding some bows, and, just sprinkling in things as you need. But what is everyone else? So, I mean, Mick, I assume obviously your vote would be to just remove the Palace Guard captain and get that.
Yeah, I'm just being very radical there. Just get rid of that and then upgrade everything else.
How many extra troops would you get for that? I mean, that's 75 points worth of things.
Well, it's 80 points.
Or 80 points.
You give Legolas a horse for 10, Thranduil a horse for 20. Then you would give several spears and bows for probably another 10. You can increase your numbers by 2, so that would be, let's say, 50 points already. And then you can upgrade some of the elves you have into Mercury Cavalry. So chances are you might end up with like 3 or 4 cavalry on top of Legolas and Thranduil mounted.
If it was a 650 point list, I would agree with you, but I think you can't actually get enough models in the warbands to make it worth it. You're going to have spare points to just upgrade guys you don't need to upgrade.
Yeah, I think you change Legolas's Elven Cloak to a horse, keep the Palace Guard captain, drop the Wood Elf Sentinel, add maybe 1 Mirkwood Cav, and then use the rest of the points to kind of pimp out the Palace Guard and maybe add in some extra bows in some places.
Okay. Thank you for your list, Arash. Anybody else has a list they'd like us to review, please leave those in the comment section below. We're going to move on to the main topic for today, which is the Army of Thror and Erebor Reclaimed. So I have a few questions for you guys. I want to start off with the Army of Thror. So with the Army of Thror, what points values do you think that they work best at?
So
Very high.
I guess
very high points.
Yeah.
I want to see what everyone else thinks first.
I'm like, all right. So I guess full disclosure on this podcast, I'm going to probably speak for Matt and Mick and say that neither myself, Matt, or Mick have a lot of experience with the Army of Thror. So for those of you who don't know Alistair, he's actually a GBHL player whom actually has a ton of experience with the Army of Thror, actually winning events with him and various other Dwarven armies. He's actually known as being quite accomplished with Dwarven armies. So as a person with very little experience, I'm going to say that I think that they can work at pretty much all point levels, but I don't really see them necessarily struggling at lower points. Even their heroes of legend are 120 points for, a pretty solid hero. They can get cheap troops if they really want to at 8 points and such. So I don't really see them struggling necessarily at lower points. So I don't think there's barring something ridiculously low, like 300 points, I don't see them necessarily struggling until maybe to hit the higher points, actually, maybe around the 8, 9, 1,000, and mostly because I think that the heroes that can contend with their heroes, despite them being cheap 120 point heroes for what they do, I think those other bigger monsters come out, the magic comes out and all of that, and I think it shuts the dwarves down. So I'm going to say it functions better at below 700. That's my guess.
Oh yeah, well, you were just saying about 300 points that they might not work so well, but if you look at Thror, he's insane at 120, and then you can throw in 14 Grimhammers and three Warriors of Erebor, and you're looking at 18 models who are basically impossible to kill at 300 points.
Maybe they work at all levels below 700. Everything down to
I was initially thinking they would be much better at higher points, but then when you actually think about the potential of how cheap their massive heroes are, they could work at any points level.
I mean, I have to say this is an army I have some experience with. I actually own this entire army. I've played it a few times. I can't say I've ever really gotten it to work well. I've won some games with it. I've lost some games with it. There was one famous test game that I ran against my wife where my wife pounded me when I was playing this list. So I'm really curious to see Alistair's thoughts on this. I mean, the experience I have with it is that at least with higher points levels, it tends to get outmatched by the various tricks and bells and whistles that other armies bring and it gets taken apart. But I'm really curious to hear what Alistair has to say.
So generally, it's completely average at every single points level I've ever played. Like, it's sort of, there's a way that you build it which you can go like the extra 50 points up, and then even once you get to 1,000 points and stuff like that, it's incredibly good at neutralizing like a lot of other armies' tricks, even though it doesn't have any itself. Because you can actually get a lot of dwarfs once you get to those points levels, because your most expensive heroes are 120 points. It doesn't matter like if they've got one uber kiddie guy who can do all this cool stuff, because you're going, oh, I've got another 40 defense 7 dwarves anyway. So actually it scales really nicely. I think it scales the best out of any of the dwarven lists easily, because you kind of start, when I do it, I start off with Thror and a captain, because you need Thror because it's army of Thror, and then you need the captain because you got March, and then you kind of go through a weird sort of thing where you have like your third hero would be like young Dwarven. If it's about 500, 550, get up to 600 because you got the extra points, you upgrade it to young Thorin, and then when you get up to sort of 700, you upgrade them to Thrain, and then you start just adding in the heroes and maxing out your troops at sort of each stage. And so like they work pretty well at nearly all points, and they work pretty much the same in my opinion generally.
Okay. For you guys, who are the go-to heroes? Mostly, you're probably only going to have 3 at most, unless you get to like the 1,000-point range where you might have 4. Is it just as simple as Thorin, Thrain, and Thror, or do you guys go with other people?
So I have an interest in. To me, I guess, just as a person who would start off with this kind of army, I think Thror would be a nice shout. Only in fact that he's not only so hard to wound, but so survivable with the Arcanstone. My assumption, and make sure I'm right on this.
You got to remember with the Arcanstone, you are guaranteed to roll a 1 or a 2 the first wound you take with the Arcanstone. So you just consider it the fate point and go on from there.
So he doesn't actually need to pass it naturally. So if I roll a 2, I could might it to a 3.
If you ever roll a 3 with the Arcanstone, might it up, unless if you desperately need that might from something else.
So, I think might it up. I honestly think that having a hero of legend for 120 points, where if I pay 120 points with Thrain, his captain tax kind of increases. I think Thrain, he has a stand fast that can pass for all dwarves, and I think that's excellent at higher points, especially when you're allying around. It's kind of interesting because it doesn't specify Erebor. It just is like every dwarf in the world, so I kind of like that. I think his blood feud ability is a little situational, but outside of that, I think Thror, and therefore you get the option to upgrade Grimhammer's to Strength 4. So I think I always would probably start with him, pretty much regardless of the points level. I think from there, I personally don't like young Dwalin as much as I like normal Dwalin, but I do love young Thorin Oakenshield. And maybe someone might correct me if I'm wrong on that, but he seems for his points extremely solid for what he's bringing to the table. So that's me personally. I start with those 2 heroes.
Mick, who do you think?
Yeah. Well, I found it quite interesting that actually Alistair said he would take Thror and then captain. And so I was thinking, that's the fact that the army moves 5, and there's no one else here, no other named heroes which actually have heroic march. I feel like on one hand, taking captain as your second hero seems to be the go-to place. Then I don't really like marching that much in general in the game. So
really,
I don't know. I feel like I would rather just stick to bashing people with something like Thrain and Thorin is my second option.
But we're in a mobility-focused game.
Yeah, but like we'll get to them in the end, and then we're gonna smash their faces.
How often do you play dwarves at tournaments?
I was about to say.
Never. Not a single time in my life have I played dwarves in my.
So just so you all know, Mick loves his really fast mobile armies with like all heroes. So that's why he doesn't like March. He never needs it.
Yeah, I love big heroes and horses, and I love horses in general and wargs. So I just don't know how an army can function that doesn't have any cavalry. Felbies are my favorite.
I have a quick question for Alistair. When you said a captain, and I may have missed this, Are you talking a Grimhammer captain or a captain of Erebor?
Captain of Erebor. The Captain of Erebor is just cheaper, and like you can get him to defense 8 and still be 5 points cheaper. It's not unless if you really want to. The shield is more useful than the throwing axes that you get with the Grimhammer Captain. Like I would say the Dwarf Captain profile is one of the most underrated profiles in the entire game.
Yes.
Because he's really solid all the way through. Like fight 5 matches most evil armies, and it's only big heroes that will stop him. And then you go defense 8. He can hold up troops for ages. He can hold up even your big Urukai heroes and stuff like that. And then Courage 5. And then the most important thing in a dwarf list, Mick, Heroic March. You need it. Sometimes you don't have enough time just to walk up and smash them in the face.
I'm sure you need it.
He is your cavalry in a dwarf army.
Right.
Now, Alistair, I'm gonna ask you this as well, because whenever I play dwarves, I'll run, for example, let's say I was running like Durin's Folk. I'll have like a dwarf king, and his 2 might are exclusively for marches. Do you use both might for marches, and then he's just a hero to throw into combat, or do you save a might with him?
It depends on the scenario. Basically, he's there in case I need a march. So often in, say, scenarios like Sea Surprise or Recon or that, his might will pretty much be 4 marches. But then if it's just sort of, I don't know, lines clash, sort of standard smashy scenario, I will often use his might just to ensure getting a couple extra kills or get like a heroic combat on the edge with a bunch of other dwarves to jump around. So it's basically he's there for the march, and then if not, you got 2 points of might to do whatever you want with, really.
So would you guys say that it kind of goes, let's say 800 points? Would you go Thror, Thrain, and a captain?
800, yeah.
Okay.
And then squeeze in Thorin somehow too.
So Thorin, I love, but he doesn't come into it until 1,000 points for me.
Really? Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess because you don't have March at that point. Like you need the March, and
you need.
It's so important to have March in a dwarf list.
Like you have to have Thror, you have to have the captain, and then Thrain is better than young Thorin for what you want in the list. And then so it's not he's bad. It's just in terms of what you need and then what you want, he like falls down the pecking order for me.
Yeah.
As far as the good.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to ask if you ever put young Balin into the list.
No. Like I like him. He's someone who I think's better to ally into other lists, but the fact is he's 5 points cheaper than a Captain of Erebor, but a Captain of Erebor is more useful in the army.
Isn't he? Maybe I've done the math wrong here. Hang on a second. Oh no, you're right. He is 5 points cheaper. Yep.
You already get a priority reroll as well, and he only has 1 might, and you're going to be generally low on might in the list because you're only going to have about 3 heroes. So you kind of go for the captain before you go for him.
Where's the priority reroll that you get?
So
Thror.
Yeah.
Oh, right, with the ring. Okay.
Yeah.
Thor and Thrain already get 1, which arguably in a game is probably all you would really end up doing anyway.
Yep, fair enough.
So I have a question. So if Thror, Thrain, and the captain are your top 3, your 4th one, you're probably thinking between Dwalin and Thorin.
Yeah.
Is Thorin better because of the extra might point?
Yeah, Thorin's better. Like usually going up to that many points, I'll go Thorin. Young Dwalin is a bit lacking for what you pay, but at certain points level, sort of between 550 and 600, because he is cheaper, he can fill in sort of the slot that Thrain has in the list.
I mean, Thorin is so much better in every way. For 15 points, you get an extra fight value, an extra defense, potentially 2 if you want to take the Oaken Shield for 5 more points. More wounds, more Might Will Fate, like a Hero of Valor instead of like. I feel like the only reason I would take Dwalin is if I just didn't want Thorin to be the general for some reason. But I mean, and then his ability of Dwarven Fury is not. He has 2 axes.
Thror is the general anyway.
Yeah.
So
so if you're thinking Thor, so it doesn't matter. So you get Valor regardless. And then like Dwalin's abilities of Dwarven Fury, I no idea when I'll ever use. When do you ever use Dwarven Fury?
So I've used it quite a lot.
You used it a lot.
Goblins.
So if you're best example, if you're in a good v evil tournament, Dwarven Fury is actually really good because you put a Fight 4 spear support behind it, which means that you're still higher than most of your evil sort of counterparts. And then suddenly you can have young Dwalin, piercing strike up to strength 6, and then he gets to reroll all of his failed wound rolls with his 3 attacks, and he can chop through like Moran and Orcs and stuff like that. And he's a pretty disposable hero. Like, if he dies, he dies. As long as he takes down like 4 or 5 guys before it happens, like I don't care.
Oh, yeah, actually, he's gonna be strength 6 with +1 to wound, right?
No, rerolls to wound.
Yeah, he gets rerolls. Yeah, so
he's got Weapon Master, but he doesn't have a 2-handed weapon.
Oh yeah. I'm just looking like. So what's the point of that roll?
If he gets shattered.
If he's shattered, yeah, that's about it. Okay, great. I see.
Which I did have someone do once because they didn't realise that he still had Weapon Master. But,
I could never get past the Fight 5 on Dwalin, which I like always forget about until he's actually in.
Yeah, he feels like he should be Fight 6 still. For me.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like he's not a hero killer, although he does have strength. He's just there to chop up the troops if you take him. But yeah, he is a bit more killy than Young Thorin, which is why he sneaks into my list as my 3rd sort of hero before him sometimes. But Thorin is better generally.
I suppose he's useful as like a tag team guy if you're going against one of those big base heroes and you can get him to kind of stand next to Thror and get the Fight 6 from Thror and uses Dwarven Fury to actually kill the thing that you're fighting. Because that's the problem I always have with Thror is, Thror, if Thror wins the fight, he can't kill the guy he's fighting because he's only strength 4.
Yeah. There's also one other downside which I find to him, which is a bit weird, is he's the only model which ever appears in my list which I can't choose not to kill an opponent with. So,
okay, that makes sense.
So one of the advantages, we'll probably come onto it a bit, but one of the advantages in an Army of 4 list, you can pretty much always maintain, stop the game from ending from 25% or stop them from breaking if you want to, because of shields and bashes.
Well, he can bash, though. His hammer is a bash.
No, Dwalin. It's got axes.
Dwalin has 2 axes. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
My next question for you guys is about the Grim Hammers. So with with Thror, he has the ability to bring them up to strength 4 at 12 points. Is it worth it, and how many do you take in Thror's warband?
Well, I'm going to guess Alistair thinks so because he said that's the reason he brings Thror. So, as far as
17, 18, something like that.
They become 12 points, and basically their profile becomes that of kind of effectively an Iron Hills warrior. The only big difference is they have throwing axes. The pick hammer allows them to do, as Alistair said, which is that if he doesn't want to end fights. Otherwise, I'm not 100% sure how many times I'd actually use the bash mechanic, though, someone may correct me on that.
Bash is so helpful. It's so
helpful. Very helpful.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very helpful.
Describe the bash mechanic again for all those.
So I've got the book open actually on bash because I knew this was going to come up. So reading it, a model armed with a mace, maul, or hammer may opt to bash. If the bashing model side wins the duel, they may attempt to knock a single opponent of their choice prone instead of making strikes. Both models roll a dice and add their strength value. Basher adds a further 1 to this total if the hammer, mace, or maul is 2-handed. If the bashing model's total is equal to or higher than their opponent's total, that opponent is immediately knocked prone.
This is after you've won the fight, right?
Yeah, so instead of making strikes, you basically roll dice.
So basically, you go 2-handed with it. You still get the -1 on the duel roll, but you get a +1 now on this bash roll. And that's really swingy because you have a whole D6 range. So that could be,
One of it, because it's a hand and a half weapon, you don't have to go 2-handed to bash.
Yeah.
And then when you're strength 4, if you've got an enemy hero charging you on a horse or something like that, you can roll. You have about 3 dice to win combat because of Thror's 6-inch banner reroll. There's an actual fairly good chance that you may win the combat dice. Instead of striking the horse, you're more likely to knock your enemy's hero off the horse, because if you, being strength 4, you're matching most heroes, and then if you tie, you succeed in the bash. So you end up knocking your enemy hero onto the floor. They lose their horse and take the strength 3 hit, I think, for being thrown.
And then not only that, if you have a spear support, they get double attacks on the guy on the ground.
So my advice is, if you're ever charged by an enemy hero into one of your Grimhammers, is always bash with the Grimhammer, because you're more likely to get more out of it, and you can next turn, if the enemy's hero is on the floor and you move first, and then still stuck on the floor.
It's strange. You never see people do it with Moranins. And Moranins have the.
I do it all the time.
You do it all the time.
Yeah. I've done it a million times.
the amount of times because you think about it like this, right? Let's say you're against any big hero, or any, let's say like a fell beast. Let's say you came up against the fell beast, and you get a bash off. If you can knock off a ring wraith off a fell beast with a bash, that is so much more worth it than doing one strike onto like the wraith or the fell beast. Like, the ability, if you take someone off their fell beast just because you bashed, it's so you almost want to buy the person like a drink afterwards, because you just feel so bad that just happened to them.
I imagine they would get +2 to their roll when you attempt to do that to fell beast.
Well, so the thing is though, is that like if you did it against a fell beast, let's say strength 4 Moranin, right? All you're trying to do is tie them, because if you tie them, you win. So like, it becomes one of those things. If they roll relatively low and you get above average roll, their fell beast is gone, and then they're on the ground as well. They take a strength 3 hit.
And you can bash with every single person, right? It's not limited to just one person doing the bash. I don't think it is.
They have to have a mace or a.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying if everyone around them has a mace.
Yes, then everybody can do it. Yeah,
it's instead of their strike.
Okay.
So if you have 4 guys do it, then you can have 4 chances to bash them.
I feel like in all my years of playing SPG, I've seen people bash at me like 2 games. It just like never happens. And I go over to the GBHL a lot too. I love flying overseas and playing in their tournaments, and I still never get bashed at. So
well, you haven't played me with my dwarves.
Yeah, I have not. Yeah.
But you know, it's something like bash as well. Like, people don't consider even for regular fighting. I mean, if you were to just go, let's say a Grimhammer with a spear sport behind, and you're just fighting normal ranks, and I'm not saying you do this all the time, of course, but if you get the bash off, then your spear sport then gets 2 dice, and they're on the ground. Yeah, because they're on the ground when the second guy makes the strike.
Yeah, that would be accurate.
But isn't it the same situation as if you kill the horse and then model gets dismounted? Do you still get?
Yeah, but because of Alistair's statistics, that it's easier to dismount them by bashing than to actually wound the horse, especially, and this really increases if they have Horse Lord. Then I think it makes a lot of sense.
I was actually referring more to the order of strikes. So, if let's say you were to knock someone over after your first strike, do the remaining strikes still get doubled? Or
yes, in SPG you can do 1 at a time, or it's kind of a weird mechanic in the game where you have the choice to roll all at once or 1 at a time, which creates very strange scenarios, most specifically with shooting, but definitely in this case.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those things that like people have to be very clear about when they're doing it. Yeah.
Remember also, Mick, that if you kill a horse, the guy's not going to be on the ground unless he rolls a 1.
Unless he rolls a 1, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's the issue there.
And in this case, it knocks him prone, right? Like so it's like an automatic 1, and they take a strength 3 hit from being knocked flying.
So I mean, it's a win-win situation.
So it is almost every way better to bash. That's all right. You have a new convert in me.
I have to admit, it was a thing which I didn't actually think about when I first started the army, and then I did it once, and I was like, this is amazing. Why haven't I been doing this for years? But it's also really had like some funny games that I've had. So like Contest of Champions, Thror isn't amazing against a lot of heroes. But one of the great things is if you've got Thrain, you can charge Thrain into the enemy's big hero along with some Grimhammers, and then you just bash him, and then you just keep them on the floor for the entire game. And then Thror just goes around poking people, and then once you've decided you've got enough kills, he comes up and does the final wound on Boromir or Dane or guys like that. And so it helps there's a lot of utility to the Grimhammer guys, because moving on from Bash, they can also piercing strike if you want to, so they can go up to strength 5 and really put some hurt onto some defense 7 heroes.
They can go
Now-
strength 5 and +1 to wound as well. So like if
Yeah.
you really if you got your heroes in the right situation, if you have, let's say 2 or 3 Grimhammers, strength 5 +1 to wound, that's going to do a lot of damage.
Also, if you've got young Thor in, you can go up to strength 6 as well for 1 turn.
Oh, that's true. Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess regarding the piercing strike you had mentioned, this applies to the Warriors of Erebor as well. I mean, how worth it do you find? How often do you find it's worth it to do that with dwarves?
Often I don't do it that much. Like, I value the defense 7 more normally, but it's one of those ones where if you're surrounding a hero or someone and you know that you're going to be outstriking them, then it's a handy thing to have. But because you got a lot of strength on the army anyway, you're still going to be cracking through those defense 6 shield walls. But it's a nice option to have along with Bash.
There's something good about Grimhammers also. Their throwing axes are apparently really good against things like Gulliver.
Right? If you all have Gulliver's terrified of throwing axes at GTs.
Yeah, I've killed Gulliver twice now with a throwing axe. Only one was on camera.
With the Grimhammers, do you do like a front rank of Grimhammers, back rank of spears with shields, and then that's like your bulk of your army, or? Yeah,
so answering the original question, which was probably about 20 minutes ago now, I would usually go 50-50 Guardians of the King, so the strength 4 Grimhammers, which I think should have been called Grimmer Hammers, but that's separate. And then you've got the spear supports behind. Do that until you get 18 Grimhammers, and then you just always go more and more dwarf warriors with spears and shields. But yeah, normally you don't need more than 18 of them, and it would get confusing on the tabletop to look at to work out which ones are guardians and which ones are normal Grimhammers. So I make it easy for myself, to be honest. But yeah.
Okay. Next question is the army bonus worth keeping?
Yes.
I mean, I don't see a lot. I guess we'll get into allies in a minute, but it feels like this army plays best played pure. Like I'm not even sure how much I'd ally into Dale, which you might correct me with that, but I think you'll end up keeping it by default unless you try to.
Yeah. The army bonus makes Thor worth his points, and because you need to have Thor to get the strength 4 guys in the army, you want to keep the army bonus. Because the army loses a lot if it's only at strength 3, because you don't die, but you also don't kill particularly quickly. I've never allied either, because like Dale don't bring anything that, because although Dale have bows, the issue with Dale is they still have to follow the 1/3 bow limit, and the Dale warrior is a rubbish spearman compared to a dwarf warrior one. And then so you go Girion, who's actually an alright hero, but you then, to get just 5 extra bows, you've got to go 15 spearman guys, and then you've got 10 useless people, in my opinion. Whereas rather have dwarf warriors with shield, who, as Mick says, you just run up the field and start smashing things. So yeah, I wish the Dale warriors were in the Army of Thor list still, because then dropping 5 bows would be handy.
Yeah.
But they're not.
Nova once, back when you could do that with the dwarves in front and the Dale guys in the back with the bows. It's actually a pretty potent list. They did pretty well with it, but can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the Legendary Legion to come out where you can.
Justice for Dale. Here we go.
So, like, your other green ally is Thranduil's Halls. Would you ever consider getting 5 spears from Thranduil's Halls?
No, they're elves. Also, I think they're only yellow ally. Iron Hills are the green ally.
No, they're elves. So bye. Sorry, it's Iron Hills. Wrong logo. Very similar to each other.
Would you ever consider putting an Iron Hills Ballista in with this list?
Not the way that I play it. I have considered it, more so when it was cheaper. But the way that I play dwarves, and I think you need to do, is you need to have as many models on the table as possible. You're not really scared of shooting anyway, because you're all defense 7. So everything's going to be wounding you on 6s or worse, and you want to be moving up the board. The Iron Hills Blister is good, but you kind of just end up sinking the equivalent of Thrain, which I would rather have Thrain over the Iron Hills Blister, basically.
I mean, the other problem is they're impossible allies with each other.
No, Iron Hills are green allies.
Iron Hills.
They're green out. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm like looking at this chart and I'm confused myself with it.
No, it gets confusing because champions Erebor are impossible, whereas Iron Hills.
Erebor's possible.
Yeah.
Now,
So the value of the Iron Hills Ballista, because I was at first when I saw it on paper, I saw it and I was like, why would dwarves care about anti-shooting mechanisms? But I find the value of the Iron Hills Ballista is to really dictate the battlefield. You don't find it valuable for that purpose in a Dwarven list when the Iron Hills regularly bring it in?
It's because it sounds like I play what I would call a horde style Army of Thror list. So one of the so when I went to the ETC last year, I took my Army of Thror, and I outnumbered or matched nearly every single one of my opponents with Defense 7 dwarfs at 800 points, because I had the 3 heroes and then it was just about 47 dwarfs. And when you're at that point, it doesn't matter if they kill 6 dwarves when they're shooting you.
Remember, I'm not caring about the anti-shooting, and I think Matt was kind of getting to this as well.
Yeah.
It's the dictation of the battlefield. In one element, you're always moving to them, and with the Iron Hills Ballista, you can actually force your opponent to move to you if you want.
So
force him to move to you dispersed rather than as a battle.
Yeah, because chance.
For me, I find I get better control of the battlefield from an extra 12 dwarfs.
Okay.
I agree. I agree with that.
Plus, it's this other thing that, like, if you're gonna have a ballista, you might as well have 3, like we discussed on one of the previous episodes. So why would you take one?
I've actually tried that list before in the old edition.
So the only reason I agree with Alistair on the Iron Hills Ballista, the only reason is actually because in order to ally in, you have to upgrade the captain to a hero fortitude.
Yeah.
So it'll cost you another 50 points. That is the only reason. Otherwise, I would actually disagree, and I actually think the battlefield control is actually really good. Now, who am I to disagree with someone who's had proven success with these tournaments? But just throw that out there that I'm I do like the control element.
So what I will say,
the way you would do it if you did it is you would, I think, probably replace the captain of Erebor with an Iron Hills captain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Replace a bunch of your Warriors of Erebor with spear and shield with just the Iron Hills guys with spear.
Okay, and just kind of rack.
What ends up happening is you end up actually building an Iron Hills list, and you go, I don't know why I'm taking the Army of Thror segment, to be honest, once you start doing that. One of the reasons why I disagree with you, Devin, on that is because where dwarves struggle in the scenarios tend to be like recon, or where you've got to capture multiple objectives, and because they don't have cavalry options, if you don't have the model count on the board, you're going to struggle to be able to get to every objective. Whereas if you've got those extra 12 guys, you can split your army up and still have lots of solid blocks to hold and capture different objectives. Whereas the blister stays at the back of the board and just does one thing for half a game.
That makes sense.
Every time I've ever played dwarves, regardless of what army, the more dwarves you have, the better off you are in the game, because A, it's hard to break through that many models, which then allows you to kind of move your heroes where you want. And then B, just having that many dwarves, you can, and because they, it's obviously different, a little different with Army of Thror with them having spear supports. But the great thing about dwarves for the most part is they can pretty much move wherever they want, and they can hold the battle line, or they can move around the flanks, and they can kind of do whatever they want.
So yeah, one of the key. So most people don't like playing recon with dwarves, whereas it's my favourite scenario with dwarves, and I haven't lost at it in several years. Because especially with Army of Thror, because one of the cool things you can do, you can take Thror's warband with the Grimhammers, plonk them in the middle of the table, and then you can send your spearmen with each of their heroes down each flank. And basically it means your enemy has to go, well, either I've got to smash through these Defense 7 guys in the middle, I've got to hold up these flanking warbands, and if you've got equal model count, they can't outnumber you where you're going around. And so what ends up happening is normally they try and smash through one thing, and then they realise they can't smash through Defence 7 dwarves as quickly as those other dwarves can run off the board, or they go and split up, and then a lot of armies that you will see will rely on bubble effects or like their major heroes to make everything work. So just like, for example, the Frandral Halls list that we talked about at the start of the episode. As soon as they leave Frandral's bubble, they're not scary anymore to a dwarf army because they don't kill me, because they don't get the +1 to wound, and they don't really do much else against me. Whereas I hit them back hard, I throw axes at them, and so as soon as you can split up your enemy, you as dwarves, because they're so reliable as a basic stat line, you can basically overpower them in small groups, and then one of the other spare groups will just go and achieve the objectives.
So in that case, what's this army actually really afraid of? Like, what's literally like the 1 or 2 worst matchups that you guys come up against?
I'm trying to think actually where else.
Yeah.
No, because you just chuck Thror in front of the Mimikill and go, I've got an Arc and Stone of Might.
I don't think anything's afraid of a Mimikill. I'm just being silly.
So what I will say is the army's not afraid of any army more so than most, but it also, because you're so limited in the way that you play, it's more difficult to win the scenarios than you would do with a lot of other armies. So it kind of, you neutralize other armies, but then also the army itself isn't good enough to mean that you will exceed against most armies. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah. Well, are you basically saying what you said before? It's just average at everything it does.
Like I have a category of how I describe dwarf armies, and basically, if you imagine you're playing a computer game, Army of Thor is you're playing dwarfs on hard mode. If Durin's Folk or Khazad-dûm is you're playing it on medium, and then Iron Hills is you're playing it on easy, and then Champions Erebor is you're playing it on super easy.
Oh, really? Wow. Well, we're going to go into that pretty soon. I'm sure a lot of people will be interested.
I want to bring up one more point, and I want to see what Alistair says about this. I know we don't like talking about those creatures, but with elves, right? I kind of find that Army of Thror is the Galadrim of dwarves, where like they just have such good, well-costed heroes that then allows you to bring more troops, and then the troops are reasonably priced, and then you can kind of do you find that they're like the perfect balance of like cost-effective heroes and troops, or do you think they're?
Yeah, basically, I would agree. It's so. The troops are solid and the heroes are solid. I would say the troops, say for the Khazad-dûm list, are better, but the Khazad-dûm heroes are worse overall in terms of their points value. Whereas Army of Thor, I think it's probably the most balanced and well-costed of all of the dwarf lists. Like, if I was to write the rules, I think the only change that I'd make is I would give for the 6-inch banner as a basic thing, and then just make up some different army bonus. But apart from that, I think they're more or less fine as they are and incredibly balanced.
I'd give them all war pigs.
Not to ride, just as pets.
Just as pets, yeah.
Like maggots, dogs for war pigs.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else to say about the list, or?
Fortunately, it's actually a pretty small list. I mean, the only other thing that maybe someone will ask is it has some convenient ally options, and I think I'm not sure it really helps to ally into the Elven list. That, I mean, yeah, sure, the 5/5, but I mean, Alistair, have you ever experimented? I know this is blasphemy, towards ally with Elves, but have you ever experimented with like throwing in elves? Because I know Iron Hills is green with Thranduil's Halls, which is why you see it, but your bonus is arguably not as good, so...
So if I was, which I never would, to ally with elves...
There we go. Right choice.
It would be... I would basically ally in Thrain and sort of a front rank of D7 guys just to go in front of the elves. It'd be more of an elf list with dwarf support than the other way around, which often is how it works. If you're allying Army of Thor, it will be an Iron Hills list with Army of Thor support. But one thing I will say though before we go, like, don't underestimate the throwing weapons on the Grimhammers. I know we joked about killing Gulliver on that, but when you've got 18 of them, and especially when you're only a move 5 army, it increases your threat range from only 5 inches to 11 inches, and it massively helps sort of those guys who will stay 5.5 inches away from you and then laugh at you because you're a dwarf and you can't run fast, and then you just throw 18 axes in their face, and then you'll see like several of them go down. And the amount of times that you don't necessarily rely on it, but getting that extra kill, like when you're charging in, and then frees up some space, it's incredibly handy.
Yeah, they also kind of provoke the other guy to charge your nice fully formed battle line because they don't want to take that throwing axe on the way in.
Yeah.
So I've seen people actually spend might when the battle lines are coming together to make sure that they, to call a heroic move to charge first, just so they can charge my nice solid battle line and not take a volley of throwing axes on the way in.
Yeah.
Just such a great trade, especially with a defense 7 battle line.
Yep.
Amount of Goblin Town armies that go, oh no wait, I really never want to be charged by these guys.
And actually, just curious, one last thing I have to mention. You pick Army of Thror, you want the banner bonus, and you don't ally because then it just becomes a different army. Do you take a banner?
Yes, I have done. So from 700 points upwards, I take a banner and a warhorn usually.
Okay.
The banner, because it actually is, because often I'll be splitting up my dwarves, because then you can have like still a banner effect on one of the other squads going after another objective, and also it gives you the VPs, because if you do come up in a scenario which you get the 2 VPs, you don't have shooting, it's a lot of effort to trudge across the board, and you're always going to be at 2-0 disadvantage unless if you got that banner.
It'll be even more effort for Mick because he won't have March.
Yeah, no. I would just be standing back and waiting for the game to end.
But for all you out there, though, if you had an Iron Hills Ballista, you wouldn't need to move.
That's true. There's literally no bows in his army, so I would actually side with Devon, especially against things like Mumax. Like, it just wrecks Mumax.
So I famously don't really take bows in any of my good armies. They're overrated.
Okay. So we'll move over to Erebor Reclaimed. So
AKA
my first question...
easy mode.
super easy mode.
We'll start off with the same question. What points value do you think they work best at?
They're like the best army of the game at a lot of points, I think, probably. Because it's just super easy.
I think they function at every point level. I don't see a point level they don't function at. Them more so, like, okay.
As I say, you've got such a variety of heroes at different points levels, you can just fit them into whatever you want. You're not really restricted.
I think even just the addition of cavalry helps them at even points levels where they could have normally, I would have normally said they struggled. So like going off of my analysis of Army of Thror, with the magic and all of that, the big heroes, I think you've got even a lot of solid hard-hitting heroes in this army. So I think, I don't see a points level where these guys fail. So.
Okay. Who are the heroes you guys will take in this list? Who are your 1, 2, 3 that you take?
All right. So I guess I'll take first shot at it since, like I said, Alistair has the most experience with you. Actually, Matt, you got a lot of experience with these guys, don't you?
So actually, no, I don't. There's another army that I run, or at least that I own, but I am struggling to think of a time when I actually ran this army. I'm not sure I've ever run this army as just Erebor Reclaimed as opposed to allying in a warband to an Iron Hills list or to something else. So I'm going to I'm going to see
on that. So for me, I'm seeing a lot of the value of the Erebor's Reclaimed is that you can get a lot more hard-hitting heroes than the Iron Hills. So the Iron Hills, you have Dane, which is obviously the most feared thing ever, but then that's where the buck stops. You have, an Iron Hills captain on Goat is not weak or anything, but clearly not to measure up to Thor and Dwalin and all of them. So that's where I'm seeing a lot of the value, as comparatively. And then not only that, but you get multiple cheap heroes or cheaper heroes than what Dane is. Because I think your most expensive hero will be really Thorn at 135. And then he's Hero of Legend, and it just goes down from there. Have Valors and such. Now this kind of can give an argument for Balin, but I still don't think I'd actually bring him in this list, and maybe I'll be corrected on that. But I would start with all the dwarves who can be mounted. That's me personally, and so that actually adds Killian Philly to the list, where normally I would have said no. I think they're really solid for what they do. I think for 85 points, they're mounted. My only issue with them is no march. If you do this, if you follow that advice, you get 0 march in the list. So if I have to go down, do they have Iron Hills captains?
Yes.
They've
They
got
do,
Dane
right?
as well.
Yeah, they got Dane
That's the
and
thing, you
Iron
have-
Oh, they have Dane in the list.
You have
Yeah.
cavalry,
Oh.
so it's okay.
He's a
Yeah,
hero
you
of
have
valor.
Iron Hills captains as well.
All right. Well, then Jesus. Then
It's like
yeah, this is an Iron Hills list without a ballista.
without the ballista.
That's it. That's all. I mean, you might as well just say this is the Iron Hills.
It's like here's Iron Hills, and then we'll give you all these great heroes that you can choose from.
Yeah, like
So when people usually say that they hate playing Iron Hills and they think they're like OP and stuff like that, what they actually mean is Erebor Reclaimed rather than Iron Hills. Because the thing is, like, you can ally in, because the Dubakar army bonus is a bit rubbish, so you can just ally in Dane with the ballista because they're convenient allies anyway.
Yeah.
And then you lose the Dane army bonus, but I mean, he's so good you don't need it anyway. Like,
yeah, I almost felt like it was kind of like a gimmicky add-on. Be like, I can 4-up Master Battle. So, wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't even see the point of playing. So the only reason really you would play Iron Hills is if wait, are these guys historical with Thranduil's Halls and the Survivors of Lake Town as well?
Yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So, yeah. So Iron Hills is like totally irrelevant. Like after these guys, they're like completely irrelevant.
It's just for the siege weapon. That's it.
Just for the three ballistas that you are taking on every 800 points.
Let me ask this question. I mean, does anybody, because this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, I mean, does anybody just run just the Heroes of Erebor with Iron Hills following them around, or do these guys always kind of show up in an alliance with somebody else, which is how I've used them?
I mean, what it sounds like is these guys are best used completely pure. Like,
they're incredible as an alliance or pure. Like, I've seen a lot of trifecta sort of Lake Town, Thranduil's Halls, Erebor Reclaimed lists, where you basically get the best of every single world. So you've got the don't die dwarves, the mass of the Lake Town, and the fight value of the elves.
Actually, Callum Eden's had that at Ottercon. Yeah, so
he claims it's a Femi list that just happened to be good. It was
that is a very obviously designed list for competitive play.
The list he lost to in the final was also a Femi with just like 2 additional models.
So
I think with the list though, the problem is that you look at it and you go, okay, so I have captains from my march. I have Dane, who if I want to keep I mean, Alistair, you might like it. I look at the army bonus, and unless you're sticking pure, it's very pointless almost, because like it's just for Champions of Erebor, no other models. So like it's like, okay, great, if you take Dwalin and Thorin, fantastic, but that's the only two, like that's it. Those are the only things getting affected by the banner. Like it's more meant for when you take the Champions of Erebor as a whole. So and it's like Alistair said, like when you take, even in a convenient ally with anyone or specifically Iron Hills, you lose the 4+ Master Battle, but that's not that big of a deal because Dane's just so good he doesn't need it. So then he becomes one of those situations where you can pretty much ally them with anything, and as long as you don't mind losing the army bonus of the other army, as long as they're a convenient ally, you take them with everything.
You know why you take away that army bonus? 5 points of heroic march. That's why you take away that army bonus. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Alfred with a captain of Lake Town and oh wait, no, you still don't lose the army bonus.
No.
Yeah, it's actually they're historical anyway.
Yeah, they're historical allies, so you still get them.
Like, never mind.
You can pretty much ally them with everything, and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I guess then the only thing you could really think about, like outside of them, is like White Council or something. But I don't know why you would really.
Because you can get Gandalf anyway.
You can get Gandalf in Lake Town.
And then he leads 12, 15 guys, however many he can lead.
You get Gandalf on horse with 15 Lake Town militia, and then you have your wizard. Maybe you throw in Dane, and then his warband, and then you get a captain and then with however many Iron Hills he can take, or you take another lake town, get even more troops.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable what you can do with this army list.
Yeah. So
their options are so limited.
to answer the original question, though, the first name, if I was going pure on the sheet, would actually still be Dane, just because you've got a kick-ass hero with the march, and he still gives all of the Iron Hill warriors auto-pass courage.
I didn't know Dane was part of the list when I originally made my observation.
Is it Dane or is it Thorin? Because obviously, if you're going to start with Dane, you'd probably want to take him under Iron Hills.
Even if in this list, I would probably start with Dane.
The reason not Thorin is the lack of +1 to wound. In my mind, what sets apart the great heroes from just the mediocre ones is +1 to wound. I mean, I feel like that is such a...
Well, he does have 3 heroic combats.
Yeah, the heroic combats are cool.
That's if you put him on a goat,
he's pretty good.
Mounted hero, 3 heroic. Mounted 3 heroic combats are terrifying.
So I played a list where I had both Bard and Thorin Oak and Shield, and obviously for the dual heroic combats. And I mean, at the time, Bard had tons of might, so he didn't really suffer from the same problem. But I always found that Thorin, anytime he was dealing with a defense 7 troop, he just wasn't killing them. But on a war goat, I can see, him being the best option on that.
Ironically, Iron Hills and Erebor Reclaimed struggled the most against Army of Thror and Khazad-dûm out of all of the armies, because you're basically paying points, which are then completely negated by the other dwarves, because they're going, well, we're defense 7, we don't pay for shield wall and all this other stuff, and it's just like we're, because of where we're rubbish, but we don't have to pay for all these things that make you awesome. Weirdly, we're actually better in the head-to-head matchup. But
that's actually funny. And then this I can see being a lot more popular. This is I don't even understand the point of playing Iron Hills other than just to try to get Ballista now at this point. So
I would go as I say, Dane first hero, Thorin second hero. Anyone want to guess what my third hero is? If it's
Captain.
It would have to be a captain,
Dane's got March. Dane's got
March.
March.
Dane's got March.
It's Dwalin on note.
Dwalin, then I'll go with Dwalin. Nope, good.
Oh no, wait. Could he be Balin because of his will points for D6 priority?
I don't know.
I'm gonna go way out of left field and say
Gloin.
No.
Well.
Gloin's pretty impressive.
Gloin's incredible. Gloin is incredible.
Gloin really impressive. Ori is interesting.
No, I think you're literally running out of dwarfs now.
Yeah, I know.
Is it Nori? Is it Nori, the one with like the mace and the shield?
No.
No.
All of these are good heroes, though. I will say.
Going back to what I was saying, Philly and Killy, I kind of like them.
No.
We're running out of dwarves, so you'll have to just
it's probably an ally.
Obviously, it's got to be Bomber. He's the only one.
No, you haven't said Biffer.
Biffer.
Oh.
So those who don't know,
okay.
So Biffer is kind of your mediocre dwarf, but he's got this ability where if he wins a fight, he can choose to headbutt, and if he actually wounds, then he can call free heroic moves every turn for free without reducing his might store.
Yeah, and once you combine that with his with Thorin's 3 heroic combats, suddenly you've got limitless might to do stuff that you want to do. Like every single turn, you just keep going heroic move. Thorin keeps going heroic combat, and then you just control the end game basically.
So, do you just spend all the might possible to try to headbutt?
Yeah.
Okay.
He just charges in on one random guy, right, and then just headbutts him and go, cool. Now I'm basically the dwarf equivalent of gambling with Banner.
Wow.
And he's actually fairly hard to take out. Defense 8 to win, but
but he's also cheap enough that because Dane and Thorin are expensive when you take both of them, that you can still get a reasonable amount of models in the list.
He's also one of those shooting units which you can take instead when you don't have the ballista, because he has throw stones with range 8, strength 1.
Yeah. Big things from that.
Yeah.
So we named a bunch of other heroes. Let's say that Biffer, I understand that's your choice, right? Like, if you had a 4th choice, let's say you were playing 1,000 points and for some reason you didn't feel like allying today. If you had a 4th choice, what would that be?
I would go Gloin.
Makes
Okay,
sense.
so-
Yeah.
He's the most reliable sort of the other combat-y style heroes. He's got the fight 6, he's got a strike, and then he's got the 3 attacks plus 1 to wound, and he rerolls 1s to wound in combat with
We
3
actually
might.
discussed him.
Hmm.
We
Yeah,
discussed
in
him in
your
our top
previous
5.
video.
Yeah.
He begins
And-
with a G, which I think was the theme of what makes an incredibly good hero.
Now, do you not go Dwalin because it's too many points spent on heroes, and that's why you go Gloin with the 4th? Is that kind of the theory?
Yeah, it's as soon as you've got Dane and Thorin already, you don't. I don't think you need Dwalin because I always want to keep my dwarf model count up. This is thinking pure anyway, and so you kind of need to save points somewhere. And Gloin is just as scary on foot as many of the mounted guys are.
So from a competitive
this is really
perspective,
interesting. Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say this is really interesting because normally when you're just like skipping through things, to me always it was a situation of, oh yeah, Thorin is great, oh yeah, Dwalin looks great, and then okay, next list. So I'm actually learning so much here.
Do you know what a dwarf is now, Mick?
Yeah, and they have to march. That's the thing.
All right. So the most useless dwarf, one you just would never play, of these, like, just don't pick it. Is there one that like you're like it's just never worth it?
Either where is he? Ori, probably.
Yeah, or I was just about to say. No.
I mean, the only reason you ever took Ori was a slingshot, and he doesn't get it in this list.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like a lot of them can't, like Dory, Nori, but like all of them have some sort of benefit, apart from Ori, which is just so impractical outside of scenarios in the campaign to get any benefit out of him.
So Ori allows you, every time you kill any champion of Erebor kills a hero or monster model, then within 3 inches of Ori. That kills that. Okay.
Yeah, if it wasn't within 3 inches, he probably would be actually quite a lot higher up the list, but because it's sort of, there you go, and you're unlikely to be where you want to be reliably. Bomber's kind of cool as a hero for scenarios where you need to protect someone, because of where he's got the 3 wounds and defense 7. Just going through quickly all of them. Dory's really nice. He's got.
I always find Bomber to be a trap because Bomber can't call heroic moves.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people often saying, bring Bomber into your Lake Town list to power up the Master and Alfred. And I'm like, I see it, but the fact that he can't call heroic moves means he's relegated to standing around Alfred and then not really doing much of anything.
In this list, though, if you take Biffy, you don't need him to call heroic moves.
And that's true. And I mean...
Well, also, in a lot of other lists, you don't need him to call heroic moves because you've got Alfred.
I mean, I'm not saying that he's anywhere near the top sort of 5 choices on the list.
Yeah, exactly.
Barlin's actually really handy if you want to hoard out Iron Hills, because he's a 60-point Hero of Valor, which is one of the cheapest Hero of Valors in the game, actually. I'm pretty sure. And so you could just... I've come up with variation of this where you take the cheap guys and you absolutely spam the hell out of like Iron Hill Dwarves. And you can get quite a scary number at certain points levels with him.
In defense of Bomber, Bomber's real use is as a tank because he's got heroic defense. And in the list where what he's doing is powering up Alfred, you use him just to kind of run into the enemy's big hero and either call heroic defense or rely on his defense 7 because he's got the 3 wounds, and then he just spends the rest of his time trying to power up Alfred so Alfred can give might to everybody else.
All right. Another question for you guys. Do you try to fit goat riders into this list?
4, so, how probably. Many? 3, maybe?
I would normally go 2 or 3.
Yeah.
2 or 3.
I feel like the heroes in the models are so expensive point-wise that every goat you put in drastically is hurting you.
But sorry, I'd never go more than 3 because I don't want to have to spend another like X amount of money on another box just to get that.
Then there's that too.
I have a bunch of them, but I never really end up taking more than 2 or 3 just because they're pricey and that's enough.
Yeah.
That's sort of the case in most lists in the entire game. You're like you never really want more than 2 or 3 unless you're playing a duel on this podcast.
Well,
Yeah.
you
You take
want more than 2 or 3.
Fun fact, Tim Hickson, California player out here, he brought a ringer army for Nova Open. It was 24 goat riders. And that was our ringer army.
I played against that army, and it was interesting.
It doesn't work for any of you. That's why it was our ringer. It doesn't work.
It was so cool to see, though. Yeah. Oh my gosh!
It's one of those things that I've always thought, oh, that'll be hilarious, and then I go, it'll also be so expensive. I'll have to
I think
win the lottery or something.
I think Tim Hickson has sworn his wallet to GW.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure whenever something new comes out, he's just got an auto mass buy for 20 years. But,
I have to say on that, our group here is committed to doing the Pelennor Field scenario out of Gondor at War, which is that one 200 to 300 figure things, and you're kind of reading through that list. And I mean, it's quite clear they were like, let's put everything we can force people to buy into this. They were having to farm out all right, we got to get 12 Kondish cavalry for this. Can everybody commit to get 2 Kondish cavalry and paint them up?
Yeah. Well, actually, while we were talking about goat riders, one cool trick that I had done to me at the ETC by, I've forgotten his name, but a guy from Poland, is if you just charge in your goat riders into your enemy heroes, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of knocking that hero onto the floor and then basically negates them for that turn, which is actually sometimes quite worth the shot.
Mm-hmm.
Although they have to be on foot.
Yeah. But with your...
Or you could bash them, and then you go in with the goat.
I mean, that is the benefit to having, maybe 3 or 4 goat riders, is if an enemy hero on foot kind of wanders out on his own somewhere, so you throw in a goat rider, 1 in 3 chance to knock him down. Oh, it didn't work. Send in the next goat rider.
Yeah. So when that Frangel with Blade Master sort of is running around on foot, you just charge a goat rider in and headbutt him.
Do you guys think this army does better with allies or just by itself?
It's probably pretty insane with allies, with things like Lake Town, free Alfred, free Might, and then can get fight 5 from elves and things.
It's one of the best. It's one of the best pure lists, but it's also so much better with allies as well.
They had the alliance potential here. I mean, I think Survivors of Lake Town is probably going to be the biggest first pick, I think. But then again, I mean, I can see someone doing just Thranduil's Halls and throwing in elves. I mean, the fight 5. I actually probably would start with this pure and just give it a shot, because I've never played just Erebor Reclaimed. In fact, I guess I probably have been playing Erebor Reclaimed the whole time and just been calling it Iron Hills.
So do you guys kind of go, if you were to make this an allied list, right? Do you try to fit in Thranduil's Halls into this as well, because then it's kind of themey? Or if you're playing competitively, is it just Erebor Reclaimed and Lake Town?
As a competitive podcast, I suppose we're going at it from a competitive point of view. It's I personally would throw Thranduil's Halls, and I guess it's really to get the fight 5 elves backing up your doors. But I mean, also he's no slouch giving your whole army terror and various other things that Thranduil does, being Thranduil.
Yeah, you're talking 1,000 points though when you're.
Yeah,
you're probably talking 1,000 points at the level where you're doing that.
Yeah. You can do it at 700, but what you don't take the big heroes from the door from an Erebor Reclaimed. You end up taking your Biffa or someone like that, and then your big hero will be Bard or Frangel instead.
I did. What's his name? Callum had Thorin on goat, Thranduil on horse, or war. I'm sorry, he had him on an elk actually, and a captive of Lake Town. That was all 800 points, I think.
Wasn't that 600 points?
It's done. Yeah, no, it's 700.
And for those who don't know, Callum with that list took 2nd place at Articon last year. So it was obviously a list that worked. But I guess if it was 800, I think, but I forgot exactly.
Now, Would you, Alistair, would you do something like what you had just mentioned? Would you take like Biffer to get the free heroic moves and then like 12 Iron Hills and then ally that into like Gandalf and
like
Bard.
a Lake Town Force, yeah.
Yeah, and then you kind of have free heroic moves for Bard every turn for that free heroic combat.
Yeah, that's kind of, if I was allying, what I would probably more likely to do. Like, you can either ally in Thorin on his own with Iron Hills, or you go for Biffer and take your Gandalfs or someone like that with Lake Town. I think these guys work a lot better with just pure Lake Town ally as opposed to with the elves, just because at that point, yeah, you're like Matt said, you're gonna be spending a lot of points to get the benefit of all three lists, unless if you can perfectly fine tune it a bit like Callum did for his article on this. But it's much easier just to sort of take the two things, and then you're not relying on stacks upon stacks of certain things being done correctly. But yeah, no, getting Gandalf in is handy. Wizards are always handy. And he can lead 15 troops, and then you just got your Iron Hills dwarves to actually do all of the killing.
And I feel like we just reviewed Iron Hills as well, because Iron Hills have essentially the same stuff, except...
there is one thing that we have missed out from Iron Hills.
And what's that?
So it's Muin and Draw.
Yeah.
Who?
Oh, they're that good? We might as well just touch on them before we move to the duel, since Iron Hills, effectively, that's just what we just covered.
Yeah. So yeah, Iron Hills, obviously you get the blister, which we've talked about, and then Dane gets even better because he gets 4+ Master of Battle if you're going pure. They get the reinforcement thing, so +1 and -1 if they're green allies, which is handy. So they've got all the same stuff as champions do, but they don't have the heroes unless if you're going convenient, which often you will do. But Muin and Dra, if you're going pure Iron Hills, these guys are actually, because of where Dane already has March, you don't need the captain. So at certain points levels, so for example 700 points, these guys you can drop in with Dane, and suddenly you got an extra 6 might, and like they're pretty average as far as dwarf heroes go. Their main downside is they're like the twins, so you only can lead 11 extra troops with them. But if you can get it right, they're actually pretty solid. I don't know why Draw is an expert shot, but can only hit on a 4+. Seems weird to me.
Yeah.
He's quick but not accurate.
Yeah, there you go. He's just firing way too fast.
But yeah, no, they're solid. If unspectacular, they're not better than any of the Champions of Erebor options. But if you're going pure Iron Hills, they are worth considering because they just drop a lot of extra might into the list.
Now, would you do something like Dane, Mern, and Draw in the captain?
Well, you said no captain because Dane already has March.
Yeah. So
that's right. Yes.
What you can do is Dane, Mern, and Draw, and then ally in a Survivors of Lake Town captain and Alfred. And then you suddenly have this dwarf army with like tons of might that can be used on March.
Yeah, so actually, one option. So I've got a 700 point list, which I've been thinking about getting, which is Dane, Muin, and Jar, and then you basically max out the warbands with Iron Hills, and then it's about 33 models, I think. I can't remember. Yeah. But and you got like 3 goat riders, and then just Iron Hills troops and a few crossbow ones in there. But this is actually the list which I then would consider putting Balin from Army of Thorin, because you don't need the might at that point, and his priority reroll is actually just really handy, and he can just bring a whole bunch of slightly cheaper dwarf warrior troops, because you don't need to keep getting more and more strength for defense 8 Iron Hills dwarfs, and then just once you get to the 750 800 point range, you can actually bulk out that Iron Hills army a lot more. Otherwise you're just going to go champions of Erebor, really.
And actually, you touched on something that I think we almost missed. Moving on, is the crossbows. So that's a unique unit that these Iron Hills warriors have. If you're doing pure Champions of Erebor, do you go 1/3 crossbows?
I don't. I don't like how crossbows stop you moving. Like I'll take 3 or 4. So if you facing someone who doesn't have any shooting and that, you can like snipe enemy heroes off horses, or they can sit on objectives and kind of shoot away. But they're a bit weird in the sense that you paid a point for them, and you do lose a lot compared to your standard Iron Hills warrior, because you don't get the shield wall bonus really, and then you lose one defense, and a defense 6 dwarf is incredibly squishy. It's been really weird when I've been trying to write lists for other races. Like I'm there going like, I've got all these defense 6 models, and I'm like, my army's really fragile. But I think it's good to have a few of them. When I would max them out is, so when I was on about the Horde style list that I considered, where you go for all the cheap champions of Erebor, because you can get up to like 40 odd models. As soon as you then plonk 13 crossbows down, and you've got all these other sort of really solid troops for when they do get to you, that's when I either go really big or just go little. I don't really go in the middle, if that makes sense.
Actually, just to follow up on that, Matt, you won the Nova Open against Adam Troke, the final round with Iron Hills Doors, and actually the whole tournament with it. I mean, you had, 6 crossbows, I think?
Yeah, I had a few crossbows in the list. I had the Iron Hills Ballista too, and you don't want to get too many crossbows with the Iron Hills Ballista because the Iron Hills Ballista will block your own shots. You have to be really careful about where you put the crossbows so that they still have shots when the Iron Hills Ballista is shooting. But, they're still useful for when, as Callum says, just to sit on objectives and snipe people, or when the ballista misses. You can also, because you can get spears with them, you can kind of put your crossbows, put 3 or 4 crossbows in the second rank of your battle line, and then have the ballista kind of shoot to one side or the other of your battle line and still give yourself targets. So you got to think about how you do it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You definitely don't want like more than say 4 or 5.
Yeah, if you're going to Blister, it's basically you go to Blister or lots of crossbows, I think. We haven't actually touched on the chariot either, but do you guys take the chariot?
All right, so there's only one way I've ever made the chariot work, and I brought the chariot to Articon actually last year, as crazy as it sounds, and I actually did pretty well with it. It actually, so there's this trick you can use with Gandalf, and I brought it to 2 tournaments and did well in the Toronto one as well. With Gandalf, it was Survivors of Lake Town, Iron Hills Chariot. Whenever the chariot's kind of stuck into like a mass of people, priority gets rolled, and if you go first, great, you get to run over everyone. So of course they're going to call a heroic move because they don't want you to run them over.
I see what this is going.
You get a free one, right? And so basically you get the free heroic move. If you fail, then great, they surround you and they already win. So Gandalf blasts one of the models that charged in and knocks everybody to the ground. So chariot's completely unaffected, as per the rules of Sorcerer's Blast. If you win the heroic move off, great. The captain goes without calling or with me or anything, and he just runs over stuff. Then they surround the chariot trying to destroy it, and then Gandalf comes in and blasts it to the ground. So it's like this cool little dynamic where the only variable that really sucks is if your chariot goes, they don't call a heroic move because they're like, screw it, I'll take the punishment, and you had priority. In which case you can't blast them all to the ground, so you have to use Gandalf to kind of mitigate like Aragorns and stuff. But that's the one scenario where I've seen it work, and I actually defeated a lot of solid lists with that because the chariot, because it's so hard to take down for most armies. I mean, I fought like Rohan armies and stuff, and they're like, "What do I do with this thing?" That was probably it's the psychological weapons where a lot of people really just don't know how to handle it, and so that is the only way I've ever successfully played a chariot. And I don't think I'd ever play one without a captain on it.
Well, I mean, if you really want to take something where it depends on whether the enemy knows how to handle it, take the champion's chariot.
Oh, there you go. So here's another one. Matt went to Articon with the champion's chariot. Go ahead, Matt. What was your experience with that?
So my experience at Articon was 3-3, and that's because once you hit there's 2 problems with the champion's chariots. One is there are certain scenarios that it just can't win, and I happen to draw a couple of those. And the other thing is that once you hit Articon at the higher table levels, you will hit the guys that can figure out how to deal with the champion's chariot. But I have to say it is a lot of fun to play. I have won one tournament with it, and I've come in third at another tournament with it. It is a really fun model to play if you kind of go into it with the right mindset of, well, if I get the wrong scenario, I'm out of it. But as I go along. So
I think the only reason my list was safer as opposed to the champion version is because I had a horde of models. So I had Lake Town and dwarves backing it up. So I had stuff. So even like when the game begins, I can put a Lake Town screen in front and then just run over my own Lake Towners to kill whatever it is I want, which I did happily in multiple tournaments. But that's the only reason that list would be safer version. But if you really want to experiment, then yeah, what did you have? Like champions with Gandalf and Alfred, and that's it?
So I did 2 versions of this. It was the Champion's Chariot with Gandalf, and I can't remember what else. I may have had a couple other guys in the unit, and that was also back when Alfred could power up Gandalf. So I think I had Gandalf, Alfred, and then a couple other guys. And then another time I ran it with Thorin on Goat and some other dwarves that would just kind of run around beside. And that was the time. Actually, I played I think both versions of that list against you, Devin.
Yeah, I had the half trolls, and you ended up running over a lot of my guys.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that was the one when you killed the chariot, and Jake came over. He goes, "Devin, you finally killed the chariot." He goes, "Yeah, I've got 2 guys left."
Yeah, exactly. Like I finally destroyed that thing, and then he has like 4 hero dwarves pop off of it, and I'm like, well, I'm screwed. So
when you're fighting the chariot, do you hit the chariot or do you hit the crew usually?
I think it depends on what I have. I think the crew are a lot more squishy.
Always is the answer to that question.
Yeah, I still think it depends. So when I was playing with it, I think most of the time you go after the crew. The crew is actually very squishy, and a lot of people, like, I was kind of shocked how squishy the crew is, especially at Defense 6.
Defense 6 dwarves, they're just...
Yeah, they're very squishy. The only reason, like, yeah, you can put another dwarf on top, which is great. You can kind of rearm it if they don't kill it fast enough. The only reason I'll go after the chariot is if I have +1 to win. And I have seen people with a plethora of... So I went against, like, a Serpent Horde list with a lot of cav that swung into me, and I didn't have Gandalf at the time. And, able to do what he wanted to do. And basically, yeah, at the +1 to wounds, he's like, well, let me just wipe the chariot out really quick. And that's really kind of what happened. The +1 to wounds just makes the defense 8 useless. So that's from that experience.
I'll caveat that and say that if you're playing against the champion's chariot, you always strike at the chariot.
Yeah, exactly. The champions are a bit different. Like,
yeah, but on the other hand, if you have monsters or +1s to wound, you're right. You may as well just gang up on the chariot and take it down because.
Yeah, and then monsters being another one. Yeah.
You're hitting the chariot. I think a 1 out of 4 chance anyway, even if you're trying to strike the crew.
But the thing is, you at least know when you get +1 to wound or you have monsters, you at least know your hits are going at the intended target. Whereas when they try to go after my crew, it divides it up a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's I agree with you on that. I mean, that's why my general thought is you may as well just go after the chariot.
Yeah. So, but there are some circumstances where you go after the crew, and that's if you have strength 4, a strength 4 army like Morannon's or whatnot, and if you have enough swings, going after the crew, just losing like 2 crew actually really hurts the chariot. Not the champions version. Well, yeah, I guess that too. But basically with the normal chariot, you lose either your shooting or like you lose like attacks, which the chariot has surprisingly few attacks, especially when it is charged. And so losing crew is painful. And if you somehow cut me off from getting other dwarves in there, say like next turn I gotta try to move on, but you call a heroic move and stop me from doing that, it starts to get a little rough. So I mean, yeah, I think there's arguments and merits for both scenarios. When I was playing with the chariot was rarely destroyed, but that's because I had that Gandalf combo. Yeah. But if you don't have that Gandalf combo, then you'll find that chariot goes down a lot faster than you would like. So,
any other talking points you guys want to speak about?
Dwarves are better than elves.
That's correct. That's the most important
make
thing from this episode.
Never ally elves with dwarves.
I wish there was like something where like if they would if you combine dwarves with elves, they had like the Denethor rule, or like you had to roll courage tests to see if they'd fight against each other.
Here's one thing I was very disappointed to not see was Braga's special rule of how he interacts with what's his name? Not the master, with Bard. Oh, so yeah. Bard, it won't respond. I wish Dane and Thranduil reacted like that because they hated each other. It didn't make sense. We won't go into it. We won't make this a rules discussion, but that's the one thing I wish.
Yes, I do find it odd that they're historical allies, considering they were, in theory, the definition of allies of convenience.
Yeah, like they only stopped killing each other when someone else showed up.
Yeah.
And at the end of the battle, it's not like they liked each other more. They
Yeah.
still didn't like each other. That is the definition of a legion. That is what it should have been a legion. Like, that historical alliance infuriates me. It is exactly what is not a historical alliance.
I'm actually curious if they will ever do Hobbit era legions, because I almost wonder if they started. I mean, part of the reason they did the legions was because, you know, they didn't really start thinking about how different armies worked with each other's in quote historical unquote situations until after they started doing the Hobbit stuff. And I'm kind of curious if they think, well, the legions are all kind of baked into the armies of the Hobbit already, so we're not
There's still a few that you can get. So you can get Battle of Ananzibar, or however you pronounce it, and you can have the Dale ones. And then I think it would actually bleed into sort of, you then get the War in the North. So you then have Dale versus the Easterlings and stuff like that. So I reckon you will do, but it kind of won't necessarily be we're doing Hobbit legions. It will be these legions are appearing because we're doing that region.
There's certainly lots of stuff they could do. I'm just curious as to whether there's anything they actually will do, because they think, you know, mentally they think they've already kind of checked that block.
I think because obviously the Hobbit is what they did for like the majority of the edition before this one in terms of new stuff, and now they're revisiting Lord of the Rings, and I think once they've done a lot of that stuff, then they revisit the Hobbit stuff, and then depending what happens with the Amazon TV series, that may come afterwards. I think that's kind of the way it's going. It's like, we haven't done Lord of the Rings for ages, we'll do that now, and then we'll come back to the Hobbit stuff, because they're obviously at some point they're going to do Forge World releases for the models, which you don't have, like the Warbats and stuff like that, and that may come around when they do a book with some more legions in for them.
Okay. Thank you for tuning in. Let us know what you guys think about the two armies. We're going to move over to the duel, where Devin will be going up against Alistair. So for anyone new to the duel, basically it is where we have two people on the podcast make a list at 700 points for this week, and I give them 3 random scenarios, and then they find out today what the scenario will be. I will then show them a random board that was chosen, and then finally they'll tell each other a list based on the scenario, terrain, and list. And Matt and Mick will decide who wins, and if there's a tie, I will decide. So the scenarios I gave them were Domination, Seize the Prize, and Heirloom of Ages Past. And the scenario that I've decided on is Domination. So what is your guys' initial reaction to Domination?
I'm not mad at it at all.
I spent so much time worrying it was going to be Smaug and then it was going to be Seize the Prize. That, like, I'm just.
So, as a person who hates the idea of Smaug in competitive play, I wouldn't even do that on the duel here in fantasy. Like, I just can't do it. So,
Okay.
but yeah, no, my army is well equipped for a domination match. So.
Mine, I think, is fairly well equipped.
Okay.
Like, as in, domination is what's kind of the standard scenario. So I think.
Yeah.
All right, now I'm going to show them the board. So this is going to be this week's board. There are a bunch of tree stubs. Yep. And basically, there's like a second layer to this. I chose this map because I really like the concept of like being able to play above as well as below. Each of the trees where there's the little circles for the platforms, there is a staircase to each one. So that's how you get up there. There's 5 different staircases to go up. There's a bunch of tree trunks all around the place. It's pretty heavily terrained. But I liked the idea of the second platform area if you had like archers you want to keep above and shoot, you have that as an option. So what do you guys think about the terrain?
So for anyone who can't see the screen, there's these, it's basically Lothlorien, but the trees, there's these really large trees, probably 3 inches in thickness and kind of diameter. And essentially they're scattered about the board, maybe about, I don't know, 12 of them, what looks like maybe 10. And so other than that, there's these like 6-inch gaps between each one that allows you to have choke points, but you can still kind of roll around and all that. to go up these staircases that Tim referred to probably would take a full movement of 6 inches in order to reasonably get up there.
That would probably be a thing that I'd talk about prior game reviews. They're going like, should we just say you move full up there just to make it easy, because bending around corners and stuff like that because of where the stairs go around the trees could be a bit impractical.
Yeah, even just because of the existence of metal models and stuff, and top heavy models, I would say that you don't even ever put your models on the stairs. Like the stairs almost act like a door.
Yeah.
So you just be up there, and that would be the end of it.
Questions actually that I'd have about the board is sort of like, how would we count so there's some fallen down trees on bases. Are we saying they're just obstacles, or is the base sort of difficult terrain?
I think in those cases, me personally, so obviously this would be an agreement of opponent, but I would just say they're obstacles. They don't look heavily forested enough to be like a woodland. Yeah. But obviously, if he has elves, then he will totally hate that that agreement.
I think you're safe on me not having elves.
It's a good thing I'm not playing Mick then.
So do we want to say that all the little broken tree terrain pieces are open? And then do you want the little woodland terrain around the tree trunks to be, you want that woodland terrain, or do you want that to be open as well?
I don't really mind, to be honest.
I'm fine as well. I think open is fine.
I would probably say open because it generally doesn't look, from what I can tell, particularly.
So there's no woodland terrain. They'll just be.
We're in the middle of a forest, but there's no actual woods here.
In the middle of a well-manicured forest.
Yeah, I mean, this is lawful and it's beautiful,
I'm actually wondering about one thing. Can you place objectives on top of those balconies and things? And so
all right.
the 3 inches, since normally you have a 3-inch diameter.
Yeah, does it go up and down?
Actually, it was ruled in an FAQ. It was finally ruled in an FAQ, and I'm glad they did that. I think it was the most recent one where it is now you measure from the base, and so it is a circle, not a cylinder, I guess you can say. Like it's a sphere, not a cylinder in a sense of measurement.
So if we've got a tall enough model, because I would say they look about 5-6 inches high. Like, say I've got a model which is 3 inches high. Would they stand underneath and be within range then?
So technically no, because as per the rules, you measure base to base to calculate distance. So technically no, height won't matter. So a kill would not even score the objective. No, the guys on top would.
The moment I would probably struggle to move around this board because of all these things.
I would actually say that as fun as the platforms look, so I actually avoid terrain like this at Nova, which is an event where I host a lot of really fantastical terrain, just like this from different areas of Middle Earth. I avoid terrain like this because those upper levels is a trap for really horrible play experiences, because 1, it bottlenecks everything. So you're not going to go anywhere. 2, you accidentally hit the board and everything's going to fall off these things. I personally would be like, in the interest of not wanting to experience these bottlenecks where you just cannot, like if the objectives were a cylinder, I wouldn't care, because then you can go to the base of the tree, whatever. But if they're being played as a sphere, I would say, no, we cannot put the objectives up there. I think it would be a very, very negative play experience where it would be impossible to get someone out of it.
So I would say if we were playing a game which we didn't have a time limit on, I'd be happy the objectives going anywhere. Because if we got a time limit, I would sort of agree with you. Basically, I would go with what my opponent thought really in that situation, because it's sort of they're going, I'm fine either way. But I kind of like they're going, as fun as it would be, I think in a tournament most people would rather play it more simply.
Okay. So now we'll move on to the armies. So I'll go with Devin first. So Devin, what was your army?
All right. So I decided to bring an army of Lake Town for us here. So I have the Master of Lake Town leading 15 Warriors of Lake Town. Then I have Alfred leading 12. Braga leading 12. And Bard with Sigrid and Tilda leading 13. And I have no idea, by the way, why he can lead Army of Lake Town troops, but he can here for some reason. So now, in this case, I took so I'll have to clarify. I have the Master as my general. However, Under normal circumstances, I probably wouldn't have done that. But I knew for a fact I could not get Contest of Champions as a match based on the 3 that Tim picked, so the Master is my general. So Bard is free to be a little grenade. And then I have Bilbo Baggins and Oin. Now, after our podcast that we just had, I would totally switch him for Biffer, but I'm not going to lie, I picked Oin. So, completely overlooked Biffer, but I have Oin. Oin's still not bad, though. Bard can't benefit from the Master's roles. Or actually, Kenny. Actually, Jesus, now I'm thinking about it, you might be able to. But while I look that up really quick, I mean, basically, regardless of whether he benefits from the banner bonus the Master brings or not, Oin will just basically follow around either him or Braga and generate like extra rerolls for them just to make sure they win their combats. He can expend a point of will, which he has 4, and then make them reroll. He can also heal, kind of a random gimmicky ability, but he can heal characters. So other than that, though, for those of you who don't know, Master of Lake Town, within 12 inches of him, and yes, it's still 12 because I've allied him to Thorn's company, that is a historical ally. So within 12 inches of him, I get +1 fight value across my entire army. Oh, I'm sorry, all the warriors of Lake Town, and they benefit from banner. And I think for that reason, Bard probably doesn't. Bard, I mean, for those who don't know, is basically a fight 6 monster who can do free hero combats around the girls. I'm going to count on Alistair not having any bows to shoot them. And Braga, for those who also don't know, because I know these are kind of rare options here, Braga can call free heroic moves if he's like a taskmaster, an old age taskmaster. When he's within the 6 inches of the Master, he can call free heroic moves on a 4-up. So he's actually pretty invaluable, but otherwise he's kind of a standard captain kind of hero with 3 points of might, but just a little bit stronger than a captain in general. So this leads me with, I actually calculated, I'm sorry, it's like 51 models. I can recount if I need to. I think it was like maybe 53. And then I have, and Bilbo. So the last bit is Bilbo. Obviously, he's tag teaming around with either Braga or Bard, kind of depending on what I'm dealing with. And I have to check, actually. You see, yeah, Braga does not have Heroic Strike. So the only one with Heroic Strike is Bard. But yeah, so that means if I want, I can tag team him with Braga and allow Braga to start winning fights. But you get what Bilbo kind of does. And the best part is he can't suffer from the negative effects.
Is Bard mounted, or can he not be mounted in this?
Yeah, no, he's fully loaded. He's mounted with a great bow. Yeah, and I have 15 bows in the army. So,
cool.
I'm sorry. No. I apologize. That is not true. I have no bows. Only Bard has a bow, and they're all spears backing them up. I'm sorry. It's front line, then spear in the back rank. That's right. I'm sorry.
He's trying to cheat already.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I saw it, and then I was like, wait a minute. No, I scratched out. There's no bows in the entire forest. Thankfully, I have not heard Alistair's army, so that can. But yeah. So I'm actually not really a big person who brings bows a lot, actually. So it's pretty typical for me. And at 800, I would have definitely brought Gandalf, but I didn't have the points here. So that is my army. And any questions regarding it?
I was wondering, how many might points total you have?
So I have Bard at 3, Braga 6, and then 2 more. So it's 8, 9 with Oin, 10, 11 with Bilbo, plus Alfred. So 11 plus Alfred.
So we'll say 14 because that's probably close to what
it's very likely to be 14 because for some... Actually, it basically is, because even if Alfred steals my... Well, he creates 1 for 1, but yeah.
And so we'll say 13 to 14 light, basically.
Yeah, 13, 14.
Alistair, what was your list?
So I actually had loads of options. One of them was a Fairdred Guards Legendary Legion with 40 plus throwing weapons, but I randomized and I didn't get that one. But so this one's probably one of the most interesting lists that I've come up with. So it's an evil list. So Serpent Horde to start off with. So I've got Suladan the Serpent Lord on Armored Horse, and then he is leading 9 Howard Warriors with Spears, 8 Howard Warriors with spears and bows, and 1 Howard Warrior with just a bow. And then we're going to jump to Mordor. And I've got Gorbag, who is leading 7 Black Numenorians. And then my final hero is the Tainted on horse, leading 8 Black Numenorians and 7 Morgul Knights.
See, you're gonna make Mick very happy because Mick has
loves the Tainted.
talking up the Tainted.
I love the Tainted. I love Cavalry. I love Silicon. It's like my favorite list ever made.
This is, I really like this. We never ever hear a list with the Tainted, so this is really,
Morgul
I would like to switch out my jury due to bias.
So
how many Morgul Knights?
7.
7 Morgul Knights.
Oh, he has Morgul Knights.
That's like 7 more Morgul Knights than I've ever seen anyone ever played in a competitive game.
I played. I'll have you know, I went to Nova.
I
like Morgul
recalculated.
Knights. Yeah.
I recalculated. I have 60 models. So just so you guys know, 60 models for your sheets. But
Mick, I went to Nova. I took the Undying on Felbeast, the Witch King on Felbeast, and 20 Morgul Knights.
This list was one that came up because I was just generally chatting about like how to make Morgul Knights, like get the most out of them, and also because we talk about the Tainted a lot, and because he's got really cool ability, and I think it combines really well with the Morgul Knights in the list. And also, I thought I'll play, as you should do, you should look at the scenario pack when you go into a tournament, and I decided that Mick was the TO, so if I take a model that he likes, that I'm more likely to get the decision. But no, so also, not so much in Domination, but actually when I was looking at it, with Seize Surprise and Heirlooms, the Tainted's ability to shut down, essentially, the opponent's heroic moves can be incredibly useful in those scenarios. Those scenarios didn't come up, but it was part of the thinking behind the list. So I've got 43 models. The Suladan is my general, and he provides a 6-inch wheel banner, so I get the bonuses for that. I have 10 bow shots with poison, and then I've got an entirely terror-causing front line with the Harbinger of Evil, and I've got the shenanigans, obviously, and magic from the Tainted. And then the Morgul Knights are terror-causing guys with lances that should hit hard.
Okay. So I'm going to roll to see who will deploy first, and then you guys can describe where you put your scenarios, or where you put your objectives.
Before we do that, Alistair needs to pick one of his figures to be the one that can bribe the master.
Ooh. So how does that one work again?
So basically, at the start of the game, your opponent may select one of their hero models to be the bearer of a large sum of gold. If the Master of Lake Town is ever in base contact with the bearer at the end of the move phase, he must pass a courage test or be removed as if he had lost his last wound.
Ooh.
I mean, to be honest, it rarely ever comes into play.
Yeah.
This time it will.
I'll just go.
This time it will.
In our fantasy game.
And you don't have to tell him, by the way. You just.
Oh, do I not? Okay.
Well, that's kind of weird, then.
Yeah. In this.
In this fantasy thing,
hammer game,
it's kind of a non-factor. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, the Master is with a 12-inch radius on his banner. He's kind of going to be sticking himself in the horde of troops. That is. So, I mean. It's kind of like a non-factor, but we'll factor it in later. Alistair, go ahead and be honest about who you.
I'll tell you who it is after we.
Wait. Before you do anything, we could ask Devin to turn around, and then you could raise your finger, Alistair, for one Sultan to go back.
I just think for the purposes of this podcast, not only does it never come up in a normal game, but in this, I'm pretty sure it's not going to come up.
This is some competitive gameplay, Devin. This is important. This is exactly what we want. We want competitiveness.
I mean, it is an important thing to think about in a real game, because the Master is really the heart and soul of this list. And if the Master goes away, this list goes away too. So
not that I could do it in this list, but if say I took the Lingering Shadow or Ring Bearer, I would pick those guys because they can jump through and get onto him for anyone who's ever in that situation. But I think I know who I'd pick this list, but it doesn't really matter too much who I pick because I can play it either way.
So let me make sure I understand your list. Suladan, Gorbag, Tainted on Horse, right? Those are your 3 heroes? Okay. Yeah. All right. And Suladan's your general.
Yeah.
All right. So it's an interesting list where all the hard-hitting elements... Oh, well, first off, am I going first?
Well, okay. So let me see. It is... Yeah, Devin, you go first.
Okay. So the interesting part about his list is that most of his hard-hitting power is actually in his warriors, not necessarily... Well, I mean, obviously, Gorbag and Suladan are strong. I'm not going to say that they're not. But Suladan, I think he has to play slightly carefully unless he wants to risk him dying. I don't have too much that can challenge him beyond Bard. I think the game, so in this type of thing, you obviously place the objectives, and a traditional strategy that I would use that I'm not sure I wouldn't use here is when someone's playing, I try to make sure the objectives are kind of focused where 3 is in one board half, and then what is it? Wait, I place 2. Yeah, so 3 are in one board half almost exclusively. So like the ones he's placing, like let's say he puts 2 in his own, so he'll put like 1 in his own. Then I'll put 1 in my own. He puts another one in his own, and I put my last one on his side, and then hope to get the 50-50 roll off. I think in this case it would force me to play aggressively, but I'm fine with that because I don't have any bows anyway, really, except for Bard. However, since I'm going first, I can't really replicate that very easily. So I think in this case I would just end up placing the 2 objectives on kind of my half. I don't see a specific place on the board where it's super logical to put it one place or another, other than maybe these barricades, but they're so close to the 6 inch of the edges that I don't think I can pick them anyway. So
one question on the barricades: how high do we reckon they are? Are cavalry able to go over them without?
Yeah, cavalry can go over. Right?
Yeah.
So
I will say this though: you might have to actually move them, because I know the Morgul Knights have their lances up sometimes, and that might just hit the. So you might they'll be able to move through it, but like you might have to actually just move.
Oh, you mean the little ramp? Well, I mean, yeah, that's a gameplay experience, but yeah. I mean, yeah. So there's really no advantage here on where I place my objectives, really specifically, especially since I am placing first. I think I might try a shenanigan where I flip the board, where now we play sideways, but I'm whatever. So I'm gonna place them normally. Alistair, are you placing the objectives?
Yeah,
special, unusual way.
I would probably try and keep them semi within a turn's movement of each other that I could get in range with my Morgul Knights. But realistically, how the board is, I think the main thing I'll do is you don't have much shooting, but I'd probably put ones behind trees and that sometimes, or a couple of them as like ones that you can just have a guy hiding around and not be scared by Bard. But generally I think you're going to end up having a more or less 5-point star kind of layout, more or less, just because of how much terrain is on the board and where you can effectively put them.
And actually, just to mention what Alistair said, one trick you guys can use in tournament play is to use the field of vision of your opponent against them. If they're not really paying attention, they may miss the random, warrior who's kind of hiding behind something and stealing points, which is why I always paint all my armies in woodland camouflage. So no, but yeah, no. So okay, so nothing crazy is happening. I'm going to deploy first. I'm pretty much just going to deploy all the way up. I play domination very similarly to just. I mean, I know I have Bard that could shoot him and whatnot, but honestly, he wins the bow war hands down. So at this point, I'm just deploying up. I'm assuming I'm going aggressive against Alistair. And I play domination pretty much as a regular just kill him sort of match until one army becomes broken. So my main objective would be focus on destroying as much as I could, and then once something breaks, use the sheer amount of might that I have in the marches and whatnot, or even just the sheer amount of models to leave like certain models maybe behind in certain places. And I don't mind shifting around. I personally just go for 3 objectives. I don't try to sweep the board. So I just go for the win. I don't really care about getting 12 out of 0. So I pick 3 objectives that look pretty logical to me, and I'm going to basically try to push Alistair off of the objectives and go for kills and just purely focus on that. The board is interesting where I kind of have to divide my army in half in a weird way, kind of depending on how Alistair moves, because the choke points, 60 models is a lot to try to fit into these gaps. Maybe some of them are 8-inch gaps, but largely they look about 6. So I probably would split my army up a little bit. I don't think I'd be particularly bothered by that. Bard would take one flank, and then Braga, Master, and all of them take the other. Master would have to. So splitting the army, let me clarify this. Obviously, that's a death trap for Army of Lake Town because they want their bonuses. So I totally get that. It would be done in such a way where I can make sure the Master is largely in range of both. Keep in mind, this is a 12-inch radius. That is huge in this game. It's 24-inch diameter. I can pretty much be largely wherever I want to be. And I don't see Alistair's army splitting up much more than 24 inches. So especially on this type of board, he might throw a model around once or twice, but that's really about it. I don't have a fell beast or anything to worry about. So yeah, I mean, full aggressive, go into him just like that. I think focusing on the Morgul Knights with Bard, depending on how it kind of depends. Obviously, Alistair's not going to just throw his Morgul Knights up and that's the end of the story. I think I would allow. I think ultimately Bard's use will depend on where Gorbag and Gorbag has strike, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I would usually do is always send Bard after normal troops, killing normal troops, call the free hero combat, and be always in range of either Gorbag, Suladan, or something like that. The Tainted obviously has that magic, so I do have to worry about that, and I do understand that. But, I mean, for the most part, I think I can try to make it where it... In order to get the Tainted to stop firing spells at Bard, I probably would have to team up Bilbo with Braga and go after one of his heroes. And then that would put, technically you could do a heroic strike, and I guess you'd still half down to 5. So you'd have to get you're fight 5, right? So you'd have to get a 9 or 10. So yeah, you'd have to heroic strike, and you must get a 9 or 10 in order to avoid Braga just sort of at least tying you at minimum. Which I guess I'm largely okay with. I mean, I guess in a really extreme circumstance, I might throw Bilbo to go after the Tainted, but I probably doubt it. Yeah, I think that'd be the only way to really stop him from firing spells is like to hope that he doesn't want to spend the might on heroic strikes. But otherwise, yeah, I think a lot of his magical firepower is going to go after Bard, and depending on how that plays out, I don't think I really need to call heroic moves, but I will anyway to force the Tainted to spend the points of will to stop it, but 2 to obviously block his cavalry. I think I have enough models where I don't really particularly care that he has terror. He has a full terrifying front line. I mean, it's nothing to laugh at, but I've seen it with Goblin Town where you're just taking so many tests that it doesn't matter, but it really can disrupt me quite a bit. I feel like the only thing I'm trying to think about now is how I utilize Bard's bow, because I feel like it's a very underutilized thing right now. And I can get 6 points of might on Bard to just shoot someone to death. I guess I can't with this strategy though. Yeah, I think I'm not sure really how to use Bard's bow. It'd be pretty situational, even with him being on a horse, only because he's just got too many bows. So, but yeah, that's pretty much for the most part how I'd play it. And just for the sake of time, I'll just give it to Alistair, just see what he says.
So for me, generally looking at the board, and because of the way you got a horde army, I love the fact how many choke points there are.
Yeah.
It's just there going like, you're realistically not going to be able to bring all 60 other models to bear at any one point. And then once you combine that with the fact that over half my guys cause terror, and then I drop you down to courage 1, means that I don't really need to move first at all half the time, because you're going to be getting in the way of yourself, and more likely than not, you're going to be failing more courage tests with your normal guys. And I don't think you've got any way of making it easier to pass, do you?
I do not, because Oin doesn't like give any kind of will or anything. No, it's just that.
And then when the lines actually hit, I'm superior to you pretty much in the sense that fight 4. I don't get the Mordor bonus, but the Spearmen do get to reroll 1.
Just be aware, I am fight 4.
Oh,
if you, yeah, I'm going to spend that every turn. Yeah, and I'm going to keep him out of range of the Tainted for Sap Will. Well, I don't think you'd cast Sap Will anyway, but even
it's a might point that you use it.
It's a might
point. Yeah, it's a might point. Yeah, so I'm pretty much. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, guys.
As a first turn, though, I would probably do a Sap Will on Alfred from the Tainted.
Does that ever happen? Alfred usually does it before the actual movie.
Oh yeah,
it's before. Yeah, it's before priority starts.
Oh, I mean, historically, I've dumped all his will
already trying to cheat. He's already trying to cheat.
Well, Devin tried to cheat earlier, so Alistair gets one as well.
In that case, I wouldn't do that. But yeah, you can, like, you'll be burning through your might to match that. When does he elect to do the might thing?
At the beginning of the movement, you can't
at
stop
the
it.
fight phase.
I'm sorry, beginning of the fight phase. Yeah, sorry.
So because it's an active ability, if I didn't need to shut down Bard for any reason, I could actually just throw a dice to transfix him to stop you doing that, which is one thing, depending on how the battle lines form up, I may consider doing. But if you're deploying right on the middle and considering where the objectives are and you've got more models, I'm aware that I actually probably wouldn't use my bows that much. I would probably deploy right up with you because I don't want to concede ground on that center objective if in theory there's two on each side of us, because while the choke points benefit my battle line normally, it also means that I can't use my maneuverability as well because it's easier for you to cover the board. So I would actually probably do the same that you did with Bard and decide that my bows may be a bit redundant in this until at least late game. And so I'll probably be deploying right up with you. And then I would have the Tainted leading. So I'm trying to think. So the cavalry contingent would have potentially the Tainted and Siladan going around the flank, because the 12-inch bubble and the range of the Tainted spells means that I should be able to cover the majority of my Black Numenorians. But there'll be essentially, I'll just be using them to smash through as many guys as possible would be my initial thing. The 6-inch banner, and when you combine the Tainted, it means that I will always be, in theory, hopefully charging the majority of my knights first and getting the most out of their lances and the knocking down. That's it for me. A lot of what I will do with the Tainted will depend on where Bard is at the time and where the Master is at the time. If Bard looks like he's going to be a scary threat or something, I will possibly use the Tainted more to shut him down and then just rely on the natural abilities of the Morganites and Siladan to take out and power through and basically a block of your guys and then sweep around the sides and either collect the objectives or come in behind your guys who will then hopefully be stuck between a block of very scary foot guys and some very scary mounted guys. But that would be my basic go-in sort of plan. It may change depending on what you would do.
I think the horses for Morganites are defense 5, right?
Yes.
So I guess, I mean, just for the purposes of this, if he ever did a full cav charge on me, I think all strikes would go toward the horses at first, just to dismount them, because I mean, just going for that 6 is really annoying. So for my actual guys, dismounting his horses would be a priority. Just throwing that out there. I guess Sigurd and Tilda are safe, so that's nice.
Yeah, I'm assuming you've hidden them somewhere that I can't black dart them.
Black dart is so weirdly ineffective against them, just because they have 1 will and 2 fate.
Yeah, it's one of those ones because the magic's really interesting. Because I could use it to get a cheeky VP on the Master if I wanted. Obviously you've got the fate and the will, but it's an option to give myself the advantage early on. Or then I could use it to try and force Bard to go crazy and follow the Tainted around everywhere. But it's not a thing that would be my go-to. I'd probably be more likely either shutting down Bard with just
or the Master.
With the basic transfixes. But it's an option if I see an opportunity that I could go for.
All right, Matt and Mick, any questions?
I have a couple of questions. Are you guys playing left to right or up to down?
Up to down. There was no real advantage to going any other way.
There doesn't seem to be. Just with the exception that if Alistair is not using the choke points, he's setting up more sort of closer to you. Then there's more of an opportunity for Devin to surround him and potentially take out some of the spears early on by engaging.
Where roughly are, because I'm imagining the middle of the board is basically where the 2 trees are,
pretty
more or less in the center. Because there's a nice choke point there, which I can cover, and then I can cover the choke point on either side fairly easily. And I've got, even though I don't have anywhere near as many as Devon, I've still got 43 models to cover that. And the size of the cavalry bases actually helps for me to cover the choke points because they're essentially 2 models wide.
Which is where
And
Bard will go.
Or it forces, or it actually allows Devon to charge your
yeah,
cover models instead without you being able to
yeah.
counter.
I feel like he won't be able to get around me, and because of the terror impact and my the tainted, realistically, I should be more often than not getting the majority of the charges off with those guys.
Yeah.
The other advantage I got, which is why I checked earlier, is where we've got the barrier on the right-hand side of the screen, right at the edge. I can use that as a defensive barrier if I want to, or I could use it as my cavalry can jump over and sweep round if Devon hasn't covered it, and he doesn't get the same benefits that I would. So I would probably lean towards putting my cavalry on that side of the board as opposed to the other side, because it's there seems to be more space from what I can tell for me to maneuver around and more advantages to gain. Because there's a nice, there's a nice little gap right on the edge which I could send a cavalry model around to get one of the objectives, which I imagine Sigrid and Tilda may be sort of hanging around there.
Okay. So, you were saying earlier your tainted would be sort of like hopping left and right.
Yeah, he's support where I need him.
Yeah.
He's got the maneuverability on the horse. It feels like Bard won't be doing that much shooting. He'll be needed to chop through as many troops as possible. So I don't think the horse is at risk of being shot away at all. Sure. So I should maintain that mobility for the majority of the game on the tainted.
Question to Devon: were you giving all the might from Alfred on turn 1? Are you gonna do it to master Hobbit, or to Bard, or split it?
So I can't save it. Clearly, because it says Sap will. So I think in this case, I'd end up giving 2 to the Master and 1 to Bard. Is probably how I might split it, but yeah, since I can't save it at all, because normally I would probably save it a little bit, but given the presence of a Ring Wraith, you know what? Give it all to the Master. I think in this case, I think his ability is going to be far more important. And I think what it does do, interestingly enough, with the Master being able to use it for 5 turns, it splits the Tainted's targets. So now he's also tempted for that Transfix, which allows Bard to go nuts. Yeah, probably just give it all to the Master.
How much might do you have, assuming you use all 5 of that on the Master's money bags?
If I use all 5 of the Master money bags, then I actually, in theory, I have 3 plus Braga's free one, right? Like, because he can do free heroic moves on a 4-up. So I have 3 plus Bard's 3 plus Oin's 1 plus Bilbo's 2. So 6, 9.
So it would roughly equal then on.
Yeah, even if I use all on money bags, I still make plenty of money. And let's say, I mean, I have free heroic combat, so Bard is just using. Either he's doing a heroic strike or whatever I want him to do. Like, I mean, honestly, I'm fine on the might aspect.
Yeah, I thought it would be. I was just for reference.
And Braga probably will save his initially, maybe for a heroic defense, depending if I'm going to deal with Suladon or something ridiculous. So the first ones for movement I'd probably do is actually either Bilbo or Oin, since their might's practically useless.
Matt, any questions?
Yeah, so Alistair, who did you pick to be the guy that can bribe the Master? And how, if at all, do you intend to use that?
So I picked Suladon.
Most important question of them all.
Because I figured that the Tainted would be more hanging around the back of my line. And then Suladon's will be the one going with the Morganites most likely.
If I may say, I'm surprised you didn't pick Gorbag. With a smaller base.
So the reason why I didn't was because I assumed that you were going to be sandwiched behind loads of guys. So you have a whole 2 front ranks in front of the Master, and Gorbag's not going to realistically cut through all those guys before you can go, oh no, he's there, I'm going to run away a bit.
Fight 5-3 attacks? You don't do that?
He can't reliably get there quick enough, and also I assumed you were thinking it would be Gorbag.
Okay, fair enough.
And then I figured Suladon has the movement, and if I wanted to, I think it's unlikely, because by the time it would come around to this, I could compel the Master in a direction away from your line, and if Suladon can get round the back, he can then just jump on him and then guarantee me that kill.
However, despite the fact that, yes, I did think it was Gorbag, full disclosure, obviously, like, with the Master being my general, I'm not letting any hero get close to him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, reasonably, I'm playing him pretty
I figured if I get in combat with him with my chosen hero, I've probably already won the game, is my sort of thought.
I'm interested. You didn't mention this, so I guess I can't give you credit for it. But I think this is definitely a situation, a list where Instill Fear is going to come into it.
That's what I was thinking as well. Yeah.
Because I mean, you could quite easily punch a hole right through the middle of Devin's battle.
I want that to be stricken from the record, considering my opponent never played it.
So one of the ideas I had last week was I could do an Instill Fear and basically punch a hole through your guys.
Viewers, please disregard what you just heard there.
I don't know why. It just came to me right now. Like I know I didn't say it. It just came to me.
I mean, I've already said I'm not going to give him credit for it, but I think that is a potent tactic in this. Is the Master's sitting behind 2 or even 3 lines of guys, and the team could kind of come right up to the line, do an Instill Fear. All of those guys run away, or all but one of them run away, and then Suladan charges that one heroic combats into the Master.
So it's one of those things which, if I'd actually used this list already at a tournament in a couple of games, I probably would have thought of that off the top. But it would be, while I was trying to I'd probably just look at the magic spells and go, oh yeah, he's got that one, because I completely forgot he had the Instill Fear. Instill Fear spell. But
it goes off on a 5-up, right?
It's a 5-up, but I think that's one where you toss
at
the critical point, you toss like 3 or 4 will at it to get it to go.
I also half considered if you probably not, because the way you deployed right up in my face, but like just doing a few 1 dice sort of drain courage on Bard may be handy as well, because he's only courage 5, isn't he, to start off with?
He's current. Well, I think with the girls, I think he bumps. I don't know. I may be wrong on that.
I was just thinking there about this drawing courage, and I was about to say, well, Alistair never said anything about it drawing courage.
I figured I better bring that in before, like.
Yeah, I think the pressure of the game, he wouldn't have remembered. He's courage 6. He's courage 6.
The pressure of the presentation made him go it too.
So first off, it should be noted that I have Jay's favorite character, so this guy is clearly equipped with whatever he needs.
It's one of those ones which, because I can just chuck 1 dice at it because it's a 2+, and it may benefit me long game. But that I have a feeling the Transfix or Instill Fear, that brilliant idea I had, will be more prevalent because of where we'll be deploying closer. Oh, actually, I just realized I was assuming we were deploying 24 inches on. We're not.
No, we are. No. Yeah, we are 24 inches up.
It is 24.
It's 24.
Up to 24.
Oh yeah, no. This whole game would be different if it was 12.
Yeah. No, I was just I get it confused with capture and control all the time as well. This is 24. Yeah, no. So
any final questions?
Oh.
All right, so I guess we go to the voting.
All right, Matt, who are you thinking?
Oh, actually, before we say this, the only time I played Devin, I did beat him. Just
no, well, hold on. That was a doubles, and
means he beat you twice.
No, he beat me and Rob Cron with him and his other. And by the way, Alistair knows we were going to win if we had 1 more turn, but he tied up the last turn on his movement with slow play. No, I'm kidding. Even slow play. But no, if it had gone literally 1 more turn, we would have won. But.
Devin forgot doubles takes a lot longer.
Yeah, I did. I way miscalculated how much time it would require. And so unfortunately, I was 1 turn too short.
So I think my money has to go on Alistair on this one. I think for 2 reasons. I think even if he never remembered to do an Instill Fear to try and take out the Master, this is a pretty serious terror wall with the terror-causing cavalry, and that's going to be a big problem for Devin to deal with. And Devin, I don't think you have enough of a numerical advantage to really overcome that. And I think it puts him in a situation, even though Alistair is at a might deficit, where I think Alistair is really going to care that much whether you're calling heroic moves or not, because I think so much of your army is not going to charge, since it needs to charge on a 9+, that I don't think it's going to be a huge disadvantage. And the other thing that I think is really important here, that because he took the Tainted, I think once you break Devin, you're gone. And I think if he can get you, if he can get you to that point, and I suspect he probably can, I think guys are going to disappear from the objectives. And I think he can just send, he can send a Morgul Knight out to threaten, to grab or threaten the objectives that are kind of far away from the center. And with no bows, you don't really, well, I suppose you've got Bard, but presumably Bard's going to have other things to do. You don't really have a good answer to that. So I think I'm going to go with Alistair on this one. Although, I do give you credit, Devin, for a lot of numbers, and I've seen this army work, and this can be a very deceptively powerful army. But I think that this terror wall is a pretty good counter to it.
Okay, Nick?
So the reason why I asked the question earlier about who Devin would give might to, I was hoping Devin would say he would give all of the might to Bard, because I was actually in a very similar game I played a few months ago against a guy here in London called CJ, and I was playing pretty much an almost identical army to Alistair. Obviously, I didn't have Morgul Knights, and my ring rate was Shadow Lord. But everything else was quite similar, and it was a game against a pure Lake Town as well, and I actually ended up losing that game because Bard managed to charge in, tear up like 4 Black Numenorians on turn 1, and then turn up and then kill like 2 or 3 another turn. At which point I realized that actually, even though I had all the magic to try to stop him, I wasn't able to, and then all of those warriors actually managed to avoid the Numenorians and just go straight after the back line and then just tore them apart purely because of how many there were. However, since Stefan said that he's going to give that might to Master, it's sort of making me lean with Alistair because of that.
I can understand. I guess the whole giving it to the Master is to 1, split targets, but 2, I effectively felt like Bard would be transfixed a lot of the times, and also because of his free air combats, he doesn't need the might. But that was a lot of the reasoning for that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that if you have more might, then you're less likely to get transfixed as well. And I think realistically, you definitely need 2 turns of Master's bonus, possibly 3. But if the game is going like 4 or 5 turns of combat, then I think you're probably losing combat at that point anyway. So I would have just pumped up Bard and tried to wreck as much as possible.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm slightly.
So I guess there's no tiebreaker vote on that one.
No tiebreaker vote.
Alas, it was fate.
So actually, if I was Devin, I would have given the might to Bard, stood a little bit further back, and then just shot the Tainted, because when you've got his 3 shots powered by the 6 might, you can actually quite easily take out some ring rates even behind 2 ranks of guys, because where you only need to get a tiny bit of luck and then you can kill him.
So admittedly, this is obviously, considering I didn't even know the full profiles of what I'm playing with. I didn't even know too much, but
I didn't even know my ring wave had Instill Fear.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So yeah, I guess through a couple play experiences, if Jay is watching this podcast, then he'd probably be like, no, you should have done it this way. And I'd be like, well, I don't know. I've never played this thing. But yeah, no, I can see the merits of staying back and at least killing the Tainted off at range, dumping all the might into Bard. So I could see that. So there you are.
By the way, Devin, I think this is a list where you wanted some bows in your army. I think if you had a bunch of bows in your army, this would be a very different game where you could you could literally just stand back and kind of bombard him with range.
When you said that you had 12 bows, I was like, oh crap. And then you were like, oh no, wait, no,
Yeah,
I don't.
I originally had bows, and then I put Oin in the list, and then that's where the bows got taken out. And the only reason I did that is because when I bought a captain, he couldn't really lead anything, so I was just like, all right, well, I'll just shove Oin or something. But yeah, I could have taken an Oin out completely, and then got bows, and I would have had a lot of bows and then some points spare, and that's pretty much how that would have worked out. But that was kind of what influenced my decision there.
I gotta say, I've never made Oin work in a list.
Oh no! Biffer's definitely going in more often. If I were to choose this again, I probably would take the dwarf out completely and just put the bows in. But yeah, no. I mean, Oin was really that option of like, you know what? I don't really know what to throw in, and I just want Bard to have some help. Like, all right, give him the rerolls he needs.
To us, I completely forgot he was in the list. It just didn't even register in my.
He's not really something worth remembering, to be honest. So even I like he's a throw in there. Like,
yeah,
all right. If I could have led more troops, I would have led more troops instead.
I have to say one thing though, that even though this looks like virtually the worst matchup possible that you could come up with, Evan, I still don't think it's fully one-sided. And I would say that if, let's say, there were like one or two less terrain pieces somewhere around middle, I think you would have a really, really good chance of winning.
Yeah, I have to admit, it was when I saw the board, it was, and then once we knew the armies, I was there again. Like, I'd been talking, I should have this. If it had been an open board, it would have been a different sort of situation.
Being able to wrap into the spearmen.
Yeah. There's sort of the wraparound plus spending more might on Bard to wreak havoc against lines. Then I think if it was a situation like that, I think you'd have it.
This is actually a very similar. It's not obviously 600 points, but it's a similar list that I was thinking about taking an Articon this year as an Army of Lake Town list. So obviously not Oin and whatever, but
When you drop Boyd and you're already over halfway there, aren't you?
Actually. And actually the big question was, do I drop Bilbo?
I think you want Bilbo just to combine up with Bard to take down like those big scary guys like Bolg and stuff like that.
Yeah, but if you drop Bilbo, you're sitting on like 60 models that start 600 points, and you have Bard and Master and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think so. One other thing you could do is, I mean, if you're going to drop Bilbo, I think this is a list, by the way, that would benefit from switching out Oin for Bomber because they are equivalent points. And so this is a list where I think you have enough guys that you can have Bomber just sit there and just tie up opposing heroes and use his ability to kind of to squeeze more benefit out of Alfred, just to keep the Masters benefit.
The only reason I didn't.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, the only reason I didn't pick Bomber was because of his inability to call heroic moves, and so his might is strictly there for either heroic defense or just whatever.
But you have Braga to call heroic moves in this list.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, Braga's always the guy calling the heroic moves.
Yeah.
Now, Matt, with Bomber, if I'm correct, right? Like he gives a will point to someone per turn.
On a 4+, isn't it?
On a 4+.
Now,
would that not? I know Alfred for the might situation makes a lot of sense, but would that not also be very helpful for someone like Bard just to get will to resist spells?
It is also useful for that as well.
Yeah. And so he could be arguably a better pick here, even in this list. Probably a better pick than Oin. I mean, Oin is so irrelevant. He heals, which is interesting. Like and then he gives rerolls. So like now Bard has a banner, but he's only that. Just interesting.
I mean, the problem with Oin's healing ability is that's the one where you have to bring the wounded character to him in order to get healed.
Because he can't move.
Wounded character. He's like a triage station, and that means if he's going to heal somebody, you got to pull that guy out of the line in order to get him healed, which makes the ability effectively useless because you never want to take that guy out of the line to get him healed.
The goal was, because Bard can't be spear supported on horse anyway, so at least until he's off or whatever, if Bard got wounded or something, then he backs up into Oin, and then the next turn Oin triggers. Or something like that. Just keep Oin always following, like I had mentioned earlier, he just follows Bard around kind of thing. That was kind of the idea, is anytime he lost combat, assuming he's not totally trapped, but then he's probably dead anyway. But so that was the idea behind it, because his defense 5 is Bard's critical weakness, so I was mitigating it.
Got one final question for Alistair. Is using
Well, you already won.
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah.
Okay.
No. This is more of a general question. But do people in England use Biffer a lot? Because I'll be honest with you, after hearing this today, it seems like a lot of people are going to start to use him based on what you described. Or is this something you came up with?
So I won't take credit for it, because I think it was Cowman or either World Champion, because they tend to lean towards more Champions Variable, where I've used it, the Army from Khazad-dûm Dwarves more. But it was a thing that everyone was sleeping on for the majority of last year, and then I can't remember which one of them took it, and they were like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then suddenly, if you're just loads of people, I know when we were prepping lists for the ETC, it was like, well, if someone's taking Biffer, and then it's a fight over who takes him, because he's just so handy to be, and he's pretty cheap to give you that.
Free move every time.
So no, it's a thing which, if we didn't have all of the lockdown stuff and that, I reckon you'd have seen a lot more popping up this year. But it only came in really towards the end of last year, when people suddenly were like, oh yeah, this is really good, let's do that instead of taking like the Alfred Lake Town Captain combo, which you saw on a lot of those lists. It was going, because that's harder to do now. It's like we can just drop Biffer in instead.
Okay. All right. I want to thank everyone for tuning in for this week. If you have any lists, leave them in the comment section below. If there's anything you'd like us to discuss, leave that as well. And we look forward to seeing you next week.